it's amazing the amount of detail you've actually gone into, and I think that's what gives what you're saying a lot more credibility than people just saying, well, the sun's doing this or climate change is doing this. You've clearly put a lot of research into what it is that you're presenting.
Yeah, the people who taught me what I'm doing told me from the beginning, you have to be 100% science-backed, and when they come to question, you throw them the charts, you throw them the peer-reviewed links, and there's really nothing they can say at that point because they always want to talk about the science. Well, here's the peer-reviewed science, and now what? What's next?
So what kind of tea you drinking there, man? What kind of tea you got?
It is a special fruit tea from Japan.
Okay, so what do we say special fruit tea? What kind of special fruits are in your special fruit tea?
It's called Meijio. It's kind of a plum.
Okay.
And then they make a wine out of it, and it's about 19% or so. It's more like a port, but it won all these world awards, and you can find it at one of the local supermarkets here. I can't believe a little supermarket in Taiwan has what's considered like the Japanese award-winning Meijio, and it's hard to find anyway, but my girlfriend and myself, we love this one because we traveled in Japan, our 5th time, and every time we go up there, we really enjoy it because it's everywhere up there. You can always find this type of drink, but here it's a little more difficult to find, and I was really surprised that this one small store carries it. So we're going to go out for a bike ride later after sunset because everything just blasting lit up here in the city. So we're going to have a few Meijios, go down and have some cheese and stuff at the park, and then go for a ride after the interview here.
Is that something you do?
Need to relax my mind for today, actually.
That's good.
I'm getting kind of,
I'll bring you down then. Bring you down. So I guess. So what time? So what time is it over there? 7 o'clock, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. 6 something at the moment.
So how weird is it to actually? Obviously, you're an international traveler, aren't you? So you're here, there, and everywhere. How do you manage to keep your body clock in check?
You don't. It's just like you got to flow with it. Because I remember it now, after the AV10 conference, then I went over to Denver. And then after I got clean, and well, it was so cold in Denver, record cold temperatures, snowed on the runway, I got stuck on the runway, too much ice, so the de-icing trucks were put away for the summer. Oh, I'd like to talk about that if I could. And we could talk about AV10, 5G, the way I see 5G being employed to be a crowd control device. Because I tell you what, after the AV10, I had so much soul searching and recollection to do on everything I learned there on how to put it into context of what I know in my field and how those overlap. And I finally figured it out into an explainable, usable format of information now. So I'd really like to talk about that.
Okay.
In Denver with the record snows when we got stuck in the airport and out on the runway.
All right, so let's
all the de-ice trucks. Yeah, all the de-ice trucks had been put away for the summer. So when there was record snow, they're like, you need to wait. So there were 11 airplanes waiting out there,
wow.
like 3 trucks.
Okay,
to de-ice.
So I guess that, like you said there, there's a lot of things to talk about. So let's talk about, say, what you do as a businessman. What got you in on this field? Because I guess you cover a wide variety of topics and subjects through your research and your podcast that you put out. But I guess you come at it from a bit of an entrepreneurial kind of businessman standpoint, which gives you like a unique perspective. Because when I was listening to you, the one thing I found very plausible what you have to say is that you looked at it like, well, I'm monitoring the climate, I'm monitoring my temperature because this is my business. You know, I'm growing coffee, I'm growing my business this way. This is important that I have to look at agriculture. And then you appeared to blossom from there. I mean, so how did you get into all that?
You know, just like whatever you follow in life seems to bloom out, wherever that, I guess, motivation and thought and energy goes into expands. And I've always tried to keep that travel and incorporate it into my life. I don't want to give that up. If it's my choice to live how I want to incorporate travel as well as being paid and get to see exotic places, new destinations, and then why not? You know, it's my choice. And that's the way I went with it. And I had worked in China and had an algae biodiesel company. This is back 2006, 7, and 8 in China. We were producing oil from algae strains out in western China in Chengdu. And from there, then that, the whole oil market hit the top and then crashed. But I was still in Asia and then a plant to plant. So started looking for other, agricultural plays out here. And then Myanmar was the next big thing happening. So just one next to the next to the next. So I've always, I even back when I was back in the day, let's say the 90s, I've been traveling around all around Central America, very familiar with coffee, worked on a couple fincas out there, like you can work on organic farms, where you can work on fincas down there, is where the farms. So, down in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, I did a couple finca tours, if you will. Spent months down there, months and months and months down in Central America. And I've always been into coffee. I really like it. And it just, so when the coffee opportunity came up, it was like, oh yeah, because I'm a little familiar with what that is. Not at that time super professional, but as you get more hands on the ground, weren't too many foreigners running around in the hills of eastern Myanmar looking for coffee. So it was an anomaly, and we learned a lot just hands on the ground by going to the warehouses, checking out storage.
Tell me about coffee.
Incredible.
So tell me about coffee. What got you the actual taste of coffee? Were you growing a particularly unique strand of coffee? Because I guess from a consumer point of view, you go into the shop, you see a bay of coffee, you see all the different varieties from different countries. They tend to be only scored on a kind of grade scale of like 1 to 6, light to strong. I mean, I guess when you are hands down on the ground, you know the difference between the very beans themselves. I mean, coffee is pretty important, obviously world export. And where does your taste sit on the scale? What do you like?
Incredibly strong. I mean, I don't like espresso, double espresso with a drop of milk in it. And that when you're trying to grade the coffee beans in the Arabica side, don't ever really touch too much the Robusta stuff. That's more Vietnam. What we did, it was the Arabica side, and we were usually grading between like 85 and 93 somewhere. And then Myanmar was around between, let's say, 87 and 92, kind of right in that range. And yeah, just the way they dry them, the way they process them. Does it still have the full skin on it when they let it dry out in the on the drying pans out there? They're concrete slabs that they get it out to, or do they take the skins off and wash it once, or they wash it twice? There's all kind of different things, naturals, and yeah. So it was. If I could get a single origin, so like 1 cup of coffee comes from one country and one farm. We weren't so much into that specialty grade. It was more about what you're talking about, something that a coffee roaster would buy 10, 20 tons of, and then what they would do is blend it in with, 30% from Central America, 30% from Brazil, 40% from Myanmar, whatever, to make their own taste profile that might be like your 4 or 5 on their scale.
Yeah.
But they're not using 100% from one single destination. Usually, most times coffee shops, when they're coming to that scale, they're blending their own to try to get a certain flavor that you talked about. Pretty much hits the cut, just the center of the road for everybody. Because if you're starting to get into these $12, $15 cups of specialty coffee with a sliver of lemon flavor, a hint of no chocolate over here, that's such a rare crowd. Most people want to get in, get their morning go-go juice, and then shoot out. If you can find somebody in that maybe top 10% that really appreciates coffee, that can actually get down to it, talk about the countries, talk about the flavor profiles, and then you have a conversation. But most people are just happy to get something and then go. A 5 if they're a 6 if they have a morning meeting, a 4 if they want to start their day. I don't know about you. You got coffee there. What kind are you drinking?
I've actually got a blend, I have to say. Typically, I actually tend to go for beans through my cafetiere or through my coffee machine. But I was in a bit of a bind a couple of days ago. I ran out of coffee, and I was like, I'll get this Kenko mix off the side. It's pretty strong. I quite like it. I tend to go for the old 2 teaspoons of coffee in there. Obviously, add water. But so, what do you do? You tend to use a coffee machine? How do you percolate yours? Do you have like a special?
Always go with since we have our own beans, and still know people who have full beans. I always go to my local coffee shop, and I take the green beans to them, and I have it roasted to the flavor profile that I like. I like mine much stronger with a little more caffeine in it. So I have them roasted exactly the way I like, and then it's full roasted beans. Then I come up with the grinder, and then we have the press and all these things that. So I like coffee. I like it. Something where I can make a much larger batch than just like a little cup like this, because I'll go through that in the first few minutes in the morning just to get my brain functioning, and then as I go through the day. What I do like is the way the coffee tastes after it gets a little bit older through the afternoon.
Yeah.
When you add the milk into it, it just takes on a different taste that I really like. So if you brew it, let's say 9 in the morning, by the time it comes around 2 p.m., if it's been espresso and properly brewed, not something out of a big pot, but that has gone through a press. If you leave it in the fridge, I don't know, the flavor changes real nice where you can just put some milk in that, shake it up. I put a little honey in, milk, and then shake it until it gets frothy and ooh, delicious. And so if you brew it out in the morning, you can keep it for the whole day and then just kind of sip that as you go along through the day.
So do you like keep it hot through the day, or do you just have it as a flavor?
Yeah, so in the morning, once it's hot and that's done, then I put it in the refrigerator to let it cool down. So I don't like the air temperature too much. I like it a little cooler. Anyway, I would prefer iced coffee, but it dilutes it so much that I just like to put it in the refrigerator and let it cool down to where it's at temperature, where if you shake it with milk, it's already cool enough to drink.
No, that's really interesting, actually.
I'm a bit of a strange Joe on my coffee. I don't know.
No, it's good because I guess as a consumer, we don't see these things too often. So I was interested to poke your brain a bit about it. That's really interesting, man. So
yeah, please do. Please do. Hey, you want to throw an introduction here and get it? And I don't know if we're live now or for what we're doing.
No,
just guide me through everything.
So I'm already recording, so it's fine. This is.
Oh, perfect. We can just drop an introduction later on.
Yeah, this is the kind of conversation I kind of prefer, really, just the kind of open, free form conversation, because I think there's something intrinsically important in terms of my learning. I like to talk through things. I like to understand. I like to understand different points of view, and also my communication skills have got better just because of me doing this podcast. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've had a few attempts at it. This was me coming back into it when I started Our Curious World, and I've been talking to some really interesting people from all around the world, from different aspects and different angles about different topics, and really just having a free-form conversation as opposed to an interview. I think interviews tend to be a bit like, this is my set of questions, and there we go. And as soon as that's done, see you later. And I think there is something okay to that when you work in broadcasting. But I think if you with a free-form conversation, there's the option to to go off track. There's the option to ask questions back to me in the same way. And I think there's something a bit more. If you're a listener to that, there's that draws you in a different way. And I think we're moving towards a new form of podcasting in general. I think that's bringing out that ability to have in-depth conversations, particularly one-to-one with people. That I think has been lacking with people lately. People are so used to sending text messages to each other, 4 or 5 messages that are already abbreviated words, and they've lost that ability to communicate. So for me, there's something really powerful about having a conversation.
Yeah, and you hit it on the head there, too, coming back for the second time, because don't give up, don't quit. That's the whole thing, is you find it, you revise it, you revamp it, and you come back and keep going at it, because you got that strong speaking voice and captivating people right away with the voice behind the microphone. It's another way to communicate and deliver a message out there, because right now the communication, you're right, between everybody is just getting more cut and more fragmented. And in the States, it's even more fragmented because they're cutting everybody by whatever political beliefs it is. And, there's 1,000 different kind of belief systems that they're wedging everybody apart in right now. And then you get into the socio-economic there, where, oh, you're rich, you're bad, oh, you got money, oh, you're bad, you live in the wrong part of town, you live in a good part of town. They're wedging everybody on money. And then also even just the simplest things of, what kind of books you want to read. They're going to wedge you on that too. Oh, you're reading this kind of book. Oh, you're way out there. Oh, you shouldn't be reading. That's too much this. Oh, we should ban these books, actually. People shouldn't even be allowed to hear these thoughts. And then if you believe in free speech, you're wedged. And if you want to, censor voices, you're wedged. But, being in the communication thing, I don't care what you say. Everybody's got a voice. And if you don't agree with it, walk away. Absolutely. Who cares what you think? If you don't agree with the message, don't try to silence the voice. Just move on until you find a message that you agree with. When you spend all the time that the Americans are doing now to try to silence voices is downright scary. Yes, this is what we saw all throughout history, right before it gets to the edge of things you don't want to really be getting into.
No, that's right. I guess it's that move towards fascist control. Even that word, it has connotations with itself. But that ability to take away anybody else feeling in danger of what that information could be to them. So, but then technically you've got then I hate to use the word, a police force or a control method. So that could be a bunch of individuals who just don't like a certain message, and they're going to go, well, we need to protect people, so we're going to stop people from ever hearing this message at all. And I think guys particularly on YouTube right now, I've found a lot of their channels have been shut down. Even like Jordan Peterson has his stuff cut off. Guys like Joe Rogan will find themselves also being trimmed in many ways. You go, so what is it they're against? I mean, is it because they just don't want dissenting ideas, or they just don't want conversation to be out there because they are working on this kind of base point of view that is, they are evil, they are bad, we must stop that voice even getting out. It's terrifying to free speech.
Yeah, my whole premise is that as we go into this grand solar minimum, the thing I talk about the most, they're going to want the line of communications cut between us, because when it really comes down to it, there are going to be food shortages on the planet. There's going to be extreme food price rises. There'll be riots because of this. There is going to be social chaos. And that's why I talk about and do my channel so we all can get prepared. Because if we were all talking about this and we were all prepared, we wouldn't have nearly as many problems that I see anticipated because we're not talking. So imagine if you're saying, hey, there's this event happening over here. This store just got taken out. These trains are getting robbed. This is the highway banditry, this, that, and the other. They're not going to want you to share that. So I think that preemptively, because what I envision with the food shocks coming, first one will be 2021. Next heaviest food shock will be 2023, 4, where it'll get really expensive and not very much around. 2028, we're in a whole different world than we understand, where food just won't be available in some places. But they're not going to want these discussions coming forward. There's too much invested in the global warming initiatives for the last 40 years. I mean, how many billions, trillions of dollars are in that whole market there, carbon, just the funding for universities, textbooks, careers based around that, more funding based on trying to prove something. If that were to suddenly be turned over and say, oops, we all made a mistake for 40 years, it is starting to cool now, they're not even going to want those discussions. Even if new science is found, they're not going to want those discussions out there and that new information brought forth because they just lost the whole, they'll be never respected or thought of as experts in those fields again. So as we go through all these massive changes coming up, they've already started. If you haven't noticed the weather around you.
Yeah.
But I think this is part of it, is to preemptively start to say that, oh, their thoughts are bad because they're talking about fill in the blank.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the first is just to put the foot in the door to try to stop the conversation as we move down toward the food riots. And that's my personal opinion. You can agree or disagree with that. But this whole thing is a slippery slope, and they're kind of carpet bombing everybody out here, just across everything. And they're even taking across. They're targeting gaming channels now, because I was watching a video today. Tim Pool was talking. I don't know if you know Tim Pool. He's a journalist, does some YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
But he was saying they were taking out now gamers because they appeared angry and fidgety on tape when they were doing their live streams. Now, wait a second. I thought it was political ideology that was getting carpet bombed, and now they're saying, oh, because somebody appeared a bit agitated and angry while they were playing their video games, so now we're going to remove them too? Wow, something way more nefarious is going on. So the whole premise of it's political speech activism, that doesn't float anymore, because removing gamers and history channels doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's like so I guess I'm trying to work out why they would remove it because they were feeling agitated. Are they saying that, oh my god, they're making their influence, as it were, by being a gamer, by being popular on like YouTube or similar platforms, by them influencing other people because people are watching them, their behavior says that there's something wrong with them and they must be stopped. Is that what they're doing there? Are they just saying that they feel that they're looking a bit agitated, they're going to influence other people, we have to intervene and stop that channel getting popular? Is that what's happened?
Yeah, so your guess is as good as mine on this. The rules are changing by the minute. So what we saw, today or earlier yesterday could have changed by today. I don't know. I really don't have the answer as to why they would now be targeting what their rah-rah squads used to be on the political end, but now they've moved over into things that make no sense. What are they going to be targeting cat videos next because somebody scolded their cat on the sofa? I mean, how far down the rabbit hole are we really going to go where there's no voice? So they're just going to shut down YouTube except for approved speech? It's kind of the direction we're going. I don't know what you feel about it, but I personally don't think that's the way we should be going.
No,
but
I really don't. So I did see a premise around maybe 5 years ago, probably a little bit older, regarding, I think it was Virgin Media. I found a PDF online, and it was talking about how they were viewing how the internet will change within the next 10 years, and it's going to have a banding system, much like how cable TV works. So you'd have like access to kind of basic internet, so like Google, Wikipedia, and so on. And then if you want to access the likes of Disney websites, it'll be a little bit higher. If you want to access alternative content, shall we say, that's probably going to be the extreme end of what you have to pay for, and you'd have to pay based on the scale. And the bandwidth that you would receive to receive information from the internet will be how much you pay. So the whole internet will be, again, like cable TV. And we've seen that kind of shutting down certainly across the Western countries. How is the internet in the other side of the world? I mean, is the speeds okay? Is there kind of censorship that's happening in the same way that's happened over here?
I'm going to say yes in the States, but in Asia, unless you're in Taiwan, or I should say Hong Kong, these other periphery countries outside China, which China tries to control, everything is super fast, like 100 megabytes up and 100 megabytes down. You know, even just using my phone as a primary source, I'm still getting like 72 up and down out of a phone, and it's only on a 4G system. Everything over here is very, very open, I should say, more open than what you would consider the States. I know they do block some certain types of content sites over here, especially using of drugs, because, you know, out in Asia, it's very, very, very controlled. I mean, you know, back in the States, you know, weed's legal in 25 out of the 50 states, at least for recreational or medical, whatever it is. But over here, whoa, you even get caught with a joint, you're going to go to jail for a long time. They're really they've indoctrinated everybody so heavily to this. You talked about it, strata. You know, everybody knows their place in society, and as soon as you start smoking or using drugs, you might go out of that band. So they do their utmost to try to keep everybody in the very narrow bands that they've been brought up in for generations and generations. Outside of that, everything's pretty much open and pretty free to talk about here, as long as you don't criticize government and do anything with drugs or have drug videos. You're pretty good. You can talk about anything, you know.
That's pretty
remarkable. But in the States, it's the opposite. As soon as you do drugs, you talk about politics, that'll get you shut down. So I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess if you talk about like the government in the wrong way, or certainly you talk about, say, left-wing politics, that would certainly get you shut down. I mean, it's a crazy time. I think we're going through this whole transition of just languages being forced to be changed by legislation, how people want to be spoken to, or the term that you use to identify them. So I'm just talking about people who are on the transgender spectrum who want their title to be Ms. or Seer or whatever prefix they want, and they want people to know that before they even start talking to them. That's a whole language thing that's happening through my workplace. And the things that I do. And it's just like, you're legislating language, where is that going to stop? And that really worries me too.
Yeah, because we see these same things through history, and, you know, living out here, and I just want to give a very quick history lesson to anybody who's very aligned with the left over here and think that they're making progress inside their ideology, that they're climbing the ranks, that, oh, I'm going to be somebody in there. Any of these kind of things, you just talked about the legislation with the names, that doesn't fly out in Asia at all. They just don't care, and it will never even crack in over here. So this will be one of those bastions of the world that will be very last affected in terms of those kind of political spectrum issues that are gaining traction today. But what is happening, and if you haven't, since I lived out in China and worked there, I was very familiar with this whole rise of communism through, you know, the bourgeois era of the 1930s. Now, I want to take you back in history a little bit here. And you have to realize in the 1930s, China was on the same par level with places like Paris and New York on the fashion scene. Motion picture scene was coming up there heavily. Fashion industry. I mean, it was a very, very elegant, high-class city at the time, equivalent with anything. Paris, Hong Kong, London, New York at that time, and it was rising up through the ranks as any of these international destinations. Then we had the war. Japanese came in, and after Mao took over, the whole communist revolution took place. And here was the thing, and I can't impart the message enough. And I'm starting to see the same exact things that are happening in the United States of these shock brown troops, the brown shirts, using waving the little red books and coming together, using the students to control the whole political discourse and the language discourse, because they did the same exact thing. It's like a copy-paste 2.0. First, they destroyed everything in the past, or they tried to. Then they tried to suppress all the language, and if you didn't have the right language. And then they tried to ban anything that wasn't 100% in tow with the ideology. So if you listened to the wrong music, they came and broke your records, they poured ink on your head, took you away to labor camp, etc. But here's the most fascinating thing. Like, all these kids were coming up in their ranks, and they were getting their little cadres together, and they became quite powerful, some of them. But then they were taken out because they became the threat, because they had too many followers. And then within the party, they rose up through the ranks, but then when they thought they were the hot to do, the rest of the Communist Party would look down and go, well, they have 50,000 people following. What if they decide to go off and do their own thing? They're a threat. We should eliminate them right now. So these people who thought they were the safest ended up being thrown into the camps as well because they had too large of a following.
Interesting.
Now, they used all the students in the beginning to bring up the movement and get everybody riled up and get into the movement to get it all through society. But once that happened, the cream that was rising up all just got whacked out at the knees and all ended up either executed or in the camps themselves. Very important message for all of you out there who are leaning toward the communist socialist ideologies. It just never worked, and you got to go to China. And obviously, if you're really pushing that direction, you didn't read much about history, or they didn't teach you much about Mao's Cultural Revolution, and who ended up in the camps. It was the leaders and the people who were recruiting for that whole communist revolution were the ones who were thrown in the camps about a fourth of the way in through the whole thing.
Wow, that's pretty
interesting.
It's really interesting. Yeah, you suddenly hear that the student movement is the catalyst really for all this societal change and the change in the workplaces. There's certainly a push towards that ideology within workplaces now. They're changing how people talk to each other in terms of interrelationship stuff, and it's quite disturbing. I think it upsets a lot of people, and I think that's where it's very much there's like a cutting edge between what is traditional, what is old, what is the way that is, and this is our way. This is a very communist, socialist kind of way, and it's disturbing how the changes are so radical. What would have to be expected, but it's man, I don't even know where it could end. That's what worries me, I guess, because I guess that it's taken till there is nothing, and then you end up with the opposite, which is a dictatorship rather than a community benefit, should we say?
Well, see now. You got to wrap the whole grand solar minimum into this thing as well.
Okay. When
you say take, and there's loss of life, and it doesn't matter if the population declines because the population is going to decline during the grand solar minimum anyway. So if you were leaders of movements or whatever global initiatives that you want to put in forth that are led by a few families and peoples out there, you would probably try to establish a new system while the old system's crumbling anyway. Like, it's going to crumble anyway. That's the whole thing, and the reason I keep talking about the economics in the grand solar minimum, because every grand solar minimum, go back to the past, just say 2,300 years, 2,400 years, the food always gets too expensive. There's always overthrows of governments because they can't feed their people. And there's just general civilization crumbles, and then it reemerges on the backside.
Okay, so
But imagine during the crumbling that you could reset society into this socialist, or like this, whatever, let's say communist, because call it what it is. I'm just not even going to put the light version in there of socialist. I'm going to call it communist ideologies coming in. If you could reset the whole world, or as much as you could, to communists, then when you reemerge out of the backside, you could get everybody in the cities, equal, one bread for you, one bread for me. We're happy.
Okay, so let's talk
I see something like this intertwining with the grand solar minimum. Again, I keep saying they're going to try to ride on top of a natural cycle to get a bunch of these initiatives through, and when we come out on the other end, it'll be something quite different.
Let's go back to that, what we were talking about there. So I noticed grand solar minimum. So for those people who are uninitiated to know what a grand solar minimum is, do you want to give us a bit of a layman's perspective of what a solar minimum is? I mean, I know, but most people perhaps generally don't, so...
Well, let me throw the question back at you, because you saw me present at AV10, an alternative view 10. So what did you glean from my presentation? Or now, how would you explain it? So I'm a guy who's in it all the time. And imagine if you're going to explain this to a friend of yours who's never heard of it either. Can you explain it? Well, how would you start to explain it to somebody to even get their interest piqued enough where they wouldn't turn off? Because we've been so set up with so many trigger words now, as soon as you hear it, you turn off and you're like, don't talk. And we've been pre-programmed not only in the language with the laughter, these new types of terms we have to use by law, but the trigger word programming is in there too. So I could probably give you a couple trigger words like UFOs, Bigfoot, conspiracy, chemtrails. These are trigger words. As soon as you hear it, your conversation's pretty much over. They've already boxed you into something. The new one for me that I get a lot of time is Ice Age. It's not an Ice Age. Don't call it the wrong thing. It's a grand solar minimum, mini Ice Age. But see, they'll drop an Ice Age right on top of you. So what are you going to think? Oh, there's an Ice Age coming. You're going to think, those things take thousands of years. Come on, this guy's insane. It's 2 miles over ice of Chicago and New York. That thing takes how many thousands of years to manifest? And this guy's talking Ice Age. So they try to derail your argument right away.
Okay. So actually, I like what you did there. I actually did, because you flipped on its head quite smartly. Instead of me going, hey, just tell me about all your stuff. You're like, actually, what did you glean from this? What did you learn from this? How I learned that. So one thing I did like is that I have an interest in history, mythology, culture, and how things have changed over time. And I said, when you were talking about how societies have rose and fell over those periods of time, I instantly connected it to what it is that I know. So when you talked about how when cultures that rose to a high level of degree. So shall we say like the Romans or even before that, when climate, our solar system takes over and affects our climate, shall we say, when that starts affecting agriculture, when that starts affecting people, and the governance that's in control is the one that is expected by the people to help them out, and there's nothing they can actually do because the cycle is already in effect. It's a solar system cycle that's happening, and that is affecting the climate, and that is affecting the agriculture. And when you were talking about those waves of like the different cultures appear to be on a 400-year cycle, and you gave an example via you had a graph up of when the solar cycles were coming through, and that is exactly when societies have rose and fall throughout history. And I took that and I was like, actually, that matches up really effectively. And when you see like when those those solar minimums have come up, so there's like the one from the 1600s, 1610, isn't it? Is that what the last sun cycle major one was?
1640, yeah, that's the famous one, modern minimum. So most people in the UK would be most familiar with that one.
Yeah, so do you want to go from there then?
I don't know. We can just step back in history and then, okay, so we'll do it like this. I'll give you a time period and then you tell me about the history that you understand during that time, or what would be a common knowledge fact, I guess, of that time. So if I say 1600s, just the average person would say kings and queens, England, a lot of ships moving to other places, to the New World, and that kind of thing. That's kind of generally what people would think, right?
That's right, yeah.
Of that time period.
Yeah, because I guess that's a time where there's an exploration element going on. They want to find new trade routes to the Americas, and obviously into the Far East. They want to bring new foods in. They want to move people as well. And I guess from there you have a lot of people trying new things for the first time. So sugar, potatoes have been brought into the Western countries. So food is changing. So I guess at that time, when there's that modern minimum happening, we're kind of perhaps compensating by bringing in food for other areas. Is that how would you see that as well?
Yeah, because especially the Roman Empire, if I say 535 AD, late antique, little ice age, how many people really have recollection and can actually tell me something or know something about that little era of time when it was the actual end of the decimation and Roman Empire finished? Actually, right around 400 AD was that end of that grand solar minimum. They don't even have a name for it, it's so far back. But then they started to come out, the warming started again, and then wham, they had 3 massive like VEI 7 eruptions during the same couple of years. And there was so much ash on the planet, whoosh, temperatures plunged back down again. Romans couldn't feed their people. And if you look around like 380 or say 350 AD, why did the Romans just try to expand so much at that time? You think they were doing it really for economic purposes? No way. They were looking for more food grow zones, hoping they could find another place that could bring more grains in to keep the people satiated. So you see these land expansions and these kind of power plays across the planet looking for resources. Follow the timelines of those too, because they did. Do you think that Genghis Khan just one day woke up and said, "Let's go invade the entire planet today"? You think Zhonghua? That Zhonghua is like the Christopher Columbus of China. See, China thought another grand solar minimum was starting, so they sent him over to Africa to look for new trade routes. And guess what? They're back in Africa today. They must have known something about a cycle and returning rainfall, because Chinese are over in Africa with all their investment projects. But what's so interesting, chase back the voyages of Zhonghua, that's Zhenghe, Zhonghua. And where did they go? He was trying to get off of trading with Eastern Africa and get that whole trade route established with East Africa, from India to Peshawar over to Africa, just like we see the string of pearls today. Imagine that.
So these cycles are, so every 400 years, is that their average? And it comes to peaks and troughs in those points?
Yeah, now the 400 years are the super intense ones, but in the middle there's a little light one. It's like a quick little, they're very short. 10, 15 years, and solar activity declines just enough to affect a little bit of food production. But then on the 400 years, really where you get these massive declines in population, governments, food production, climate shifting tremendously. Like we're in the beginning of this new shift right now. So this is why the weather's so tumultuous around the planet. And it's always in the beginning of the shift, because everything's been stable for 400 years. And now it's getting bashed out of place. So everything's trying to collide in the atmosphere. Got new jet streams moving to new places. oh wait, there's already a jet stream there, get out of the way. Well, now we got a doubling or tripling of jet streams over those areas, and we're getting these massive rainouts, cloud bands are shifting. This beginning part of it's the most ferocious in the weather changes. So after about 10 years, it should stabilize more, but then it's just going to get cooler for a while, and then we'll come out of it. And apparently coming out of it, the weather's not as mixed up as it is going into it, because everything is kind of morphed and shifted around, and nothing's really stuck stably for centuries and centuries to move to a new pattern. It's only been there for a decade or decade and a half or two, max 20 years, and then it starts to shift out again. So that's not really locked in stone as it would be on a multi-century pattern.
Yeah, because I'm looking at your data here in your article. So this is the if you were to sign up to your website, that is oilseedcrops.org. What happens when you hit your subscribe is that you send us a PDF, and that's what I was just browsing through as we started this conversation. And I'm looking at this data for this about the variety of solar activity features that are happening and the 11-year solar cycle as well, because I think that's what confuses some people with this as well. Is that would you agree with that?
Yeah, because I mean, how much are you hearing about the 11-year solar cycle, solar minimum right now in your news over there? Are you hearing about it a lot? Because it's in the papers quite a bit in the States about the 11-year solar minimum.
Yeah, I think over here it's generally there's a lot of the science-based TV shows do talk about it quite a lot. There's a particular scientist works for the BBC called Brian Cox, a very famous guy. On a lot of his astronomy shows, he's talking about the 11-year solar cycle. Certainly the last one, what is the solar system? He was talking about that quite a bit. So do you find?
I noticed Alexa. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, is that like a topic that comes up quite frequently in the eastern countries, just due to the agriculture base there?
It is, but they are so deep into moon cycles anyway. So if you live over here, every single holiday that comes up, it's based on a lunar calendar. There's people out burning money, people going to the temples. It's very much still ingrained to follow the cycles of the moon, to follow the longer cycles within cycles, and it's still just so much part of the culture. The birth sign, we have Virgo and whatever, Sagittarius and whatnot. Well, they have the same, animal signs, if you will, snake, rabbit, cow, pig, whatever. But they're so following, still so ingrained, and it is such a integral center part of the society and age is still understanding the planetary movements, the heavens, the cycles of the moon, and how all this is integrated. So they're very aware of the 11-year solar cycle, but they're very aware also of this larger, heavier cycle, this grand solar minimum, very aware of it now. You can see China posturing everywhere. You can see Japan up there posturing. You see what's happening in Korea, because they all have their own belief systems of the seed point of human consciousness is at the Big Dipper, according to the Beidou Qixing cult, or the cult of the Big Dipper. And it's not like a cult, like a Jonestown cult or anything. It's what they use for like a belief system, like the Taoists or something like this. But they follow a couple of different traditions out here, one being the fox. And so you got to go really far back in history to find much about the fox, 3,000 years prior, and you start to get a lot of iterations about the fox. But they're still following that same trajectory of following the stars around the heavens to see what's going to happen, because the emperor was always removed when the mandate from heaven was removed. And they even use it today, like Xi Jinping. He still talks about he has the mandate of heaven to be the ruler of China, to put himself as the new emperor in there. Yeah, they're still so focused on it. It's a center point. But, we don't even know basic astronomy back in his class. You go to even a high schooler and ask them about the planets, they won't know what you're talking about. At least in an American school, they're so taken away from anything science-based and astronomy-based. It's just really, they have the most basic rudimentary levels. They won't even know how big the sun is comparatively to the Earth. It's like the simplest facts we all knew by 3rd, 4th, 5th grade back when I was growing up.
Yeah, same here. Astronomy and science actually was it's what inspired me. I was inspired to look at the heavens because I was at school and my teacher would be talking to me about it and the fantastical things that are happening in space. And most of the books that I had by the time I was 8 were all astronomy based. So I had that particular, inquisitiveness about the heavens because my mother was interested in school taught me. But it's true. My son does, but I guess he probably gets that more from myself. But I'm not sure anyone else does. People don't even know what the names of the planets are. That really disturbs me. And then we share our celestial neighborhood with them.
Yeah, and again, it shows you in the schooling system where the priorities lie. It seems that there's a concerted effort, at least in my own opinion, to steer everybody away from the basic knowledge of how these cycles are repeating, because it is such an integral part to keep our society functioning until the very last minute before the wheels fall off. Because right now, if the news media world, they've been on this full thing about everything's stable, it's going to remain stable. We're at the 11-year solar cycle, not the grand solar minimum. Don't listen to those crackpot guys, although the astrophysicists are talking about it. It's in all the peer-reviewed research. You got the top NASA people, European Space Agency people, Russian Space Agency, and everybody in between, even Piers Corbyn over there in the UK, talking about our sun's going into a very prolonged solar activity decline called a grand solar minimum. It's just established science. But they don't want people to look at it, understand it, because your spending habits are going to shift. You're going to move your spending habits greatly. They're going to shift gargantuan steps to whatever direction they're going to move. Once you understand what this is, your lifestyle is going to change too. You're going to start to take preventive measures. You got kids, you got family. You want to keep them safe. You're going to start buying a lot of different stuff. A lot of that money is not going to go into these traditional industries, and some are just going to dry up and die on the vine. Now, they're trying to prevent hoarding, first of all. They're trying to prevent artificial runs on the just-in-time delivery system and the manufacturing base itself. Because the governments are, I've been told directly, governments are in this process right now of continuity of government maintenance, if you will. That's about the best way I can describe it to you. Governments are buying all the same stuff we would want to buy so they can maintain the government or the continuity of it as everything else around it collapses. They need the same supplies. They need the food, the medicine, the repair parts, the motors, the machinery, the vehicles, the fuel. They need all that same stuff that we need. But if they came clean and told the world what was happening, now you'd have 7 billion people out there trying to buy the same stuff that all 200 plus governments on the world are trying to buy at the same time. There's going to be a lockup somewhere along there. Yeah. And people are going to panic, and they're going to stop. They're going to pull their money out of the banks, and the fractional reserve system is not going to work because there's just going to be too many withdrawals, and people won't invest in the stock market. And why would you go put into your 401k? I need the money to buy more seeds. Give me all of it today. So there'd be a lot of just institutional changes if they really came clean on the financial side of it. Forget everything else. Just the way the financial system works globally would collapse if they came clean and people started to adjust their spending or not putting it into the traditional investment mediums because, hey, you can retire in 50 years, 30 years. Don't worry about that. It's coming now. So this is what I believe, that there's a lot of reassurances in the media that it's only 11 year and everything's stable. And I don't know if you see those same articles, but there's a full-on, full-court press here about everything's stable. Everything is totally stable. Back to work here in the U.S. media.
No, I haven't seen that actually. I haven't seen the. I've seen the mentions of it, but that's about it. That's just that's what I would search on the old with Hathaway. Remember the solar science physics group talking about the solar minimum?
Yeah, they were more than 100% wrong on their predictions. Pretty much when you look at the predictions from the last solar cycle, John Casey's the person you want to follow. He's a former NASA space advisor as well. He was the only one who pretty much got it right in that 78 to 79 range. Everybody was up in the 120s. And again, when we come for solar cycle 24 predictions here, 25 predictions rolling out, they're completely, I personally feel that they're calling too high again. But again, it goes right back into that keeping society stable. If the solar researchers were to come out from NASA and European Space Agency and everybody in between and independents and come out and said, yeah, we are only going to 50 sunspots or a little less for the average, that would verify we're going to do a grand solar minimum. So then people would really start to look into it and research just like you're doing. What is this grand solar minimum thing here?
So I'm just looking at this article here from astronomynow.com, published in 2015, and it talks about the diminishing solar activity will bring around a new ice age in 2030, published by the Moscow State University press release. And again, I'm only skimming the article, but yeah, it appears to be pretty much what you're saying there. There's an article here actually referencing a 1677 painting from Abraham Adonis of the Frozen Thames, when obviously London froze over during the 1600s.
Mm-hmm. That's what they're expecting again. Now, see, but the problem is they use that word ice age in that title. No, it's a mini ice age. It is not an ice age. So you find a lot of these
high hard
like
science?
Media Matters, SPLC. These are the kind of watchdog groups in America. Well, there's a scientific one that I got bagged on too. They put me in their bad watch list. I was trying to do research for that for today's video as well. If you give me a second, I have it on
Sure.
on my here. I'm going to minimize my screen here while I talk to you and take a look myself. They're also of the same. I turned off so I could have the better bandwidth here.
Okay.
So it's a scientific organization. So there's media watchdogs that you can only listen to them, and they're the ones who can tell you if news is fake news or not fake news. But again, there's a whole bunch of these in the scientific arena too. But they keep coming back and they keep using this word ice age. Stop doing that. I'm not talking to you personally. I'm talking about the writers of these supposed watchdog scientific sites. They keep again, it's this whole trigger word thing. They keep putting ice age. So as soon as you see it, what is the first thing that you think? If I say, hey, there's an ice age coming, what's your first thought?
The first thought is something like where the ice is like a mile thick and it's covering like a large portion of the Earth's crust.
Yeah, that's exactly what you think. And then what's your second thought after I say, hey, there's an ice age coming by 2030?
What do you think? That's going to take a long time to build up. That's probably not going to happen in that way. But I guess...
Yeah, and that guy must be a lunatic for even talking as such.
Okay.
Or girl. Or they or them or whatever you want to call them. People talking.
That particular article was by a lady, but yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful subject. Like I say, it touches everything of the human existence. There's everything from the financial side of things, the economic side of things, but more importantly, the human side of things, isn't it? It's about how we function food, because we don't function in cold very well. We need food to survive. We need our energy. So it is going to affect the entire human existence, and it will change the world considerably. So in terms of this has been a pattern that is reoccurring, as you're saying. And we talked about all the different effects that could have. I mean, so do you think the governments must know about this and are preparing accordingly, and that's why they're buying all this gear up?
Yes, and beyond that, the distraction, they're going to keep going so you don't look in the right direction. The distraction factor, as I call it, is going to keep ramping up until one day you wake up, literally, and you realize what has happened. And at that point, it's too late. I believe that time is around 2021 of harvest season. So look for the bigger, more Hollywood-esque distractions. So far, how many distractions can you think of right now that people are actively talking about? I mean, the division in the Trump camp versus the rest of the United States, and the trade deal with China and the possible tariffs with Mexico. That's the distraction factor in America for like just the general population. They need to keep everybody fighting amongst themselves and that. That's like my simplest example. But what do you have on your end over there?
So in the UK, of course, the biggest topic on most people's agenda is Brexit. How we've essentially split from the EU, but we haven't really, because there's lots of trade deals that have already been signed into agreement behind that, like the EU Defence Union. The links between our military services have already happened. Our infrastructure is owned majority by European nations and countries, and by corporations that are obviously on the continent. So that I don't think that's factored into many people's consciousness, or they're not aware of that. They seem to think British Gas is still British Gas when it's actually owned by Centrica. They think British Telecom is BT when it's actually owned by Telefonica, which is based in Spain. So there's this holiday where you can literally have an instant split, I think, is a sticking point. We now have Prime Minister has now resigned from role, so we have political divisions within each political party that are for and against, because I just don't think they know how to do it. And every political party wants to take over so they can make their grand vision come to fruition. But within each of those camps, there's lots of different divisions themselves. So Brexit is quite the mess. Then you have the situation with Ireland, which is Ireland is part of the EU. Northern Ireland isn't. So there's effectively what they call a hard barrier there, or a soft barrier, literally. People can come in that way and then just come to England, or do they reinforce it? That doesn't happen. And they've obviously been considerable time in the last 20 years between Northern Ireland and Ireland to have a much more settled agreement. They appear to be much more coherent in terms of conversation and dialogue these days. But Brexit is pushing that back the other way. You have the situation of the migrant crisis happening. which again is driven by, need for food or a need for a better life because where they've come from is very difficult, or the opportunists seeking to expand their ideology.
Finger pointing everywhere, wherever you look. They're getting everybody to point fingers and just be so distracted by the smaller things in life that this is the point I'm getting at. It goes on in every single country. They're keeping the finger pointing going on, so you're not really looking at the greater picture of why your food price just went up 20%.
Yeah.
Thought the inflation rate was 2%. And even that's just straight up theft from the central bank. So when they say inflation rate's 2%, I interpret that in English as 2% theft every year of my wages. But regardless of that 2% theft or 2% inflation, whichever way you want to term, it's the same exact thing happening. 2%, but then suddenly food rises 20, 23%. How did that happen? How did that sneak right in there? Yeah. Why is nobody talking about that?
So it says where I work as a department leader within a retail chain. So yeah, I see those effects at the shelf edge. I see those prices going up. I see corporations effectively trying to merge and buy each other out because they're trying to bring down the price of food so it's kept at a manageable level. Again, what you're saying there is that it perhaps is to hide that effect of what's going to go on.
Could be. And if I could string 3 points together that you were just talking about in one lump sum.
Go for it.
Alternative View 10 opened my eyes to a lot of different things, especially the dates where many of these programs need to be implemented by. The United Defense Force and the EU there, that's going to be taking a deeper shape and a more cohesive unit by 2023. The Rapid Response Force highway system, expressway system for the Rapid Response Force needs to be completed by 2023. The rollout of 5G needs to be completed by 2023. And, after listening to David Ellis explain what this whole integrated EU Defense Force was, and then I took it to study this a little further, and what I found, there's a branch off of this called the European Friendly Neighborhood Policy. Well, this gets the EU straight down into North Africa and the exact same areas where the Romans were growing grains to send back to Rome during the height of the Roman Empire. It was much rainier and much wetter back then.
Yeah,
in the presentation, I talked about the rain cycles returning to North Africa. So how is this United Defense Force going to occupy North Africa, right in the same grain-growing belts that the Romans had? More rain now, grain's coming back. Libya got incredible production. Tunisia this year, all-time record production. And then somehow, 55 north and above in the Ural Mountains, terrible planting this year. Bulgaria just got flooded out, half the corn. France just got ripped across with that that cyclonic bombogenesis that took out whatever crops were in the field that had emerged. America's down 58%. It's the lowest crop planting. Even back, you have to go back prior to 1938 in America to find the least amount of crops. And China just lost 30% because of this ravaging, armyworm invasion there. They're eating everything alive. Literally, this old armyworm is going off the hook. So we have major crop loss on the corn side of things. The wheat's not doing much better, but then we got all these united fronts coming through to occupy grow zones in North Africa. And here's the kicker. That date, 2023, let that stick in your mind. Because this is the first years that myself and everybody I talk with talk about the first global food shortages happening to the point where it's going to destabilize government, and it's going to be so far in the face that it's going to cause panic. And this is when we're going to see some real shifts in our society. Are these exact same dates, 2023 and 24? That would explain the Rapid Response Force and the completion of the highway system in the EU, because there's going to be breakaway countries and people protesting all over the place, and they're going to have act quickly to get into the EU to control the EU citizens. It's not about an invasion. Come on, that's going to be to suppress the citizens inside the EU. And I'll leave it there.
No, there's a really interesting point here. So, I guess, I'm not sure if I have the slides available. Perhaps you could send me them. I'm talking about the one that David Ellis sent. So, in terms of because you gave your presentation about, is it the day before David Ellis spoke, or was it on the same day?
The day, yeah, a little bit after he spoke. But then after that time, when I was on the airplane going to Denver to do my speech up at LeakCon 2019, I had a chance to really put everything together. So I added in 4 or 5 more slides as I did my next presentation. Now, the last thing I wanted to chip in there, and I forgot that, the immigration.
Yeah.
This is so brilliant, yet it's so scary. Those northern African countries are full of very ferocious fighting men. Those guys are so strong, and you just don't want to get in a scrap with those guys.
No.
They know only what they've grown up with. They have not had the wonderful conditions we've had growing up in our own lives in some of the countries we live in.
Yes. They've had to fight.
If you're going to try to occupy those countries, you were going to have the most difficult time of your life trying to keep your army down there. It would be guerrilla warfare, and your guys would be terrified, and women too, of even being there, because it would be such a hostile force that you'd be coming up against. But give them free passage to Europe, give them free passage anywhere. Now you're depopulating the whole. These would be the resistance fighters that they're giving free passage to through all these immigration policies. Why are they sending them all to Europe? Why are they sending them all to all these other countries across the planet are taking them in? There'll be no resistance force when the EU integrated army and the EU neighborhood friendly policy goes down to occupy those grain growing zones of North Africa. Wow. There'll be nobody else there to resist. They're all gone. So these guys, really they're going. It's a one-way trip. They're never coming back. And all the resistance has been taken away. You can go in, and now I'm not saying you, but the EU and China can rock in there and grab it. I'm of the volition now that China is very much part of this immigration policy behind the scenes. We pretend like, they're fighting here, there, and everywhere, but I am saying they're working together to get those grain grow zones in North Africa and the eastern part of Africa depopulated so there will be very little or no resistance. But that's going to become, and here's my research that I did on that. This is crazy here. If they were to get the grain growing zones, what the Romans used, the primary water source from Libya set out a massive irrigation project across North Africa, they could grow more grains than all of North America combined. All of North America combined would be they could surpass that by setting up the grain grow zones in North Africa if they had the right water source, because the rain's above ground with the rainfalls increasing. Yeah. So think about that. It won't matter if the rest of the planet goes offline or huge amounts of Northern Europe go offline and Canada goes offline and parts of China. Who cares? They're going to have a whole new something bigger than all of North America combined in Northern Africa.
So this is when you say offline, you're talking about the food production, aren't you? The agriculture production.
Yeah, agriculture production going offline. There's very many forecasts out there. You can just find this anywhere on the net about what's anticipated in the grand solar minimum circa 2023, 24. There'll be very little production coming out of Canada or the northern states of the United States. There'll be very little production coming out of China. They're already starting to see losses. North Korea as well. And 55 north in Europe, anywhere above there, Ural Mountains, that whole area, going to be taken pretty much offline. Parts of Australia, parts of South America, they don't grow so much down that further Tierra del Fuego tip, but Brazilian agriculture will be affected along with Argentinian. So one place goes offline, you need a replacement. This is the most brilliant chessboard move I've ever heard of. How many years whoever would have thought of it? All these plays that they need to get all these people out of there depopulated so they can go in and get a whole new grow zone.
Yeah, you look at the biggest scheme of things, that appears to be, that's a big game of chess.
That is game of chess, but here's the game. They knew the grand solar minimum was coming, so you just leave it down to that. They knew these changes were coming, and they've already been preparing for them.
Yeah,
that's the whole kicker right there. They knew it was coming. Why aren't they warning anybody? Why aren't they telling us this is coming?
Yeah, so where I was going to go with which presentation came first is that, of course, there was you used both a very similar map of Europe and which contained Africa in regards to what the EU Defence Union has said that it wants to do in regards to Africa. And it particularly highlighted areas where they want to go and they want to. What's the word for it they used? I think it's like population control or citizen control or something like that, or to expand into the Africas. And David Ellis obviously presented that chart that was which was an EU document and presented that. And then when we laid it over with what the presentation that you did, and that it's interesting that it really was the same areas of regards to where food growth is going, particularly where China is investing, in regards to what is now the growing green areas. They appear to be the same belts that they're after. So, yes, it does appear to be, on the whole, that's the areas the EU wants to get into, that's the areas where China wants to get into, because that's where future agriculture is going to be, because it has to be in order to continue their culture. So that there's almost like a hidden fight for survival that's happening between where do we need to invest, where do we need to buy up, because, heck, we've got to survive.
You think the Ukraine was just about politics? It's the biggest grain-growing belt in Central Europe there, period. nothing bigger. It's the largest grain producer right in that area of Europe.
I did see, obviously, I follow IT a fair bit, and they were talking about the some of the what are they called? Arrangements with China and Russia in particular. So Russia, despite this fact it's under all these economic sanctions, has flipped its economy into it, and it's the largest agriculture grower in the world, and it's growing an absolute surplus of stock and obviously selling it to China, and that's now one of the biggest trade deals that's happened in the last 5 years. That's huge, and it ties in very well into what you're saying. Is that whole area of like a lower end of Russia, it's this huge grain belt of crops that they can grow and export, and I think that's why essentially like countries like the US, like Europe, like England and so on, are they're very quick to demonize that. They're very quick to demonize China and Russia as the enemy, because I guess they want those same areas as well.
Take a look at Kazakhstan, clear out. It's on the western border of China or the far east of Russia. Another huge grain grower, and guess who's in there helping them revamp their agriculture so they can almost double their output? China and Russia. So what's going to be more valuable for you? A cubic meter of natural gas, a barrel of oil, or a ton of food?
Well, the ton of food is very short-term prospect as to how long it will last. But I guess you've got to flip your agriculture growth. You have to turn it to be vertical. You've got to grow in the smallest amount of space. So I guess also is where
that's true.
It's very interesting. So when I'll be honest with you. So when I came across vertical farming and the likes of growing indoors, probably about 2008, 2009, I became aware of an independent documentary that was aired called The Zeitgeist Addendum, and Zeitgeist Moving Forward.
Saw that too.
Yeah, Zeitgeist Moving Forward was really interesting in regards to vertical farming. Rather, that's where they were looking to go. It was like one of the solutions for the world being the way that it is. And I was very much aware of that, and I kind of got involved with that on a ground level here in Nottingham. And I was like, okay, so what? I don't really know anything to how to implement it. It appears rather simple. It almost appears that we could, transform places like car parks or abandoned buildings into like indoor farms effectively with the right lighting conditions and growing. And I've kind of wondered in 10 years, how come we haven't done that if this is coming? Taking abandoned spaces and turning them into, corporations or companies of, why haven't we gone into full-born, new agriculture technologies?
I asked myself the same question, and the only thing I can think of that these facilities are being built in secret, that if they did start massive infrastructure projects to build out such, and there were billions of dollars in companies jumping in, that would also send up a big red flag, like, why would they do that? It's so easy to grow these vegetables outdoors. Why would you set up and spend millions of dollars to put an indoor facility inside there? So I'm saying if it is being done, it's being done with private companies that don't have any eyes on them, that don't have any stockholders or shareholders meetings to be beholden to where they have to present what they're doing. I bet it's a lot of private money doing this, because I know some guys in Tennessee, and they also operate in Kentucky. What they do is they take disused mine shafts, the horizontal ones, not the vertical ones, but the horizontal mine shafts. Could be anything, because there's been a lot of mining in the last couple hundred years in the United States. We'll take an old disused mine shaft or a cave or parts of something into the ground, and then they'll set that up for you in there. And that's kind of their business, what they do. Get the humidity control right, try to figure out what plants are going to grow well inside there, get up the all-in-one LED spectrum grow lights put in, and then get the right electrical supply to you out there. So you can have, they're trying to couple it with fish farming, because a lot of time in these mines, they got water seeps and stuff coming in there. So they try to develop it where they'll actually dig some area out, concrete it in, put the fish in there, and then have this whole system recirculating where, the fertilizer from the fish is coming down and dripping through the tubes, and they're getting that all indoor, completely protectable, and in no way, shape, or form will be damaged by hail or high winds. But it's a very specialty niche type of thing. But you know what? Their business is really expanding as of late. And
because it was like
that's all I can say.
Yeah, aquaponics, I think it's called, isn't it? The way you
with the fish when you add it in. But what I do out on my back patio out here is I just have the vertical grow tubes. Now, you ask how to set one of these things up. It's an octagon-shaped tube made out of stainless steel, and then inside there's two flat braces, and then you pull the coconut coir between them, and actually it sandwiches in there. On the outside there's 13 different holes down the front of the tube, and you just split open there's a special tool. It's made out of I wouldn't say stainless, but a little bit harder steel. Where you poke it in, you twist it, and it opens a hole, and you just put your seeds in there or plant roots in there. Turn it back up, and then everything's on a timer, and we water for 15 minutes for every 2 hours. Okay. That thing turns on. It's a DC motor. That's very important to draw water up. DC is far better. So it's a DC motor, and it's gravity fed, so the DC motor just pulls the water up, and it's a hose that's sort of slight angle, and it goes down all the 8 tubes, and then after the 15 minutes, whatever water's in there just starts to drip down, and it's all gravity fed, and when it comes out of the bottom, it just goes back to the recirculating tank. So right now we're about using, say, 20 liters per month to be able to grow all the vegetables we need. We don't buy vegetables anymore.
So what kind of vegetables?
Water issues are another big thing. Water issues are huge. So if you can grow an enormous amount of plants for circulating water like that, why not?
So you talk about there appears to be a concerted effort also to buy up water supplies, or even to dam them off from country to country, particularly where there's a river flows from one country into another. There's particular efforts, certainly some African countries, to literally dam them up so they don't flow into the next area. So the water wars. There's a powerful documentary came out about 2010, and it was called "The Fight for Water" or "Blue Water." That was really interesting how that's happening, particularly across the developing worlds. How nations and states, even counties, I think it was a county in India, is stopping water from going from one area into the next just because it wants to become its own state eventually at one time. And I can see that happening. So I think it was areas of Ukraine do that as well. I think there's a major river that comes through. I could be wrong. How they're damming it up so it doesn't flow downstream to their neighbour. Worrying stuff is that keeping fresh water fresh, because obviously a lot of water is just being fed into the ocean. So do you see that as well? Do you see keeping fresh water fresh? Is that a powerful issue that you're seeing in the Eastern world?
The pollution is off the hook out in places like China and other places that don't have so much environmental regulation, like Cambodia, Vietnam. It's just by the wayside as the water is a secondary concern. We have much more understanding of the pollution water, but in China they understand it now too, because it's starting to affect the health of just so far off the hook cancer rates out there that you're just born and you get cancer and you die pretty much now in China. It's so polluted everywhere from the air to the water, but they've understood it, that the roots uptake that too. So they're really trying their best to keep the water cleaner. There's been a lot of new regulations. I'll give China credit. There's a lot of new regulation. They just can't pour straight up whatever into the river anymore. If they get caught, they get arrested, and some of them get executed. But by and large, it's still guanxi, and whoever pays the most amount of money in bribes doesn't get seen. Oh, sorry, gifts. You got to call it a gift. So whoever gives a gift to the inspectors, even if they're blowing like blue dye into the river, is something that they did from some cadmium process, run over the treatment of leather into whatever, and it comes out the backside all contaminated and polluted, and it's blue. If it goes in the river, if I give you a bag of money, you won't see the blue color, and if anything happens, you'll go ahead and stick the police and the dogs on the protesters, and it's still like that.
Wow,
it's crazy.
Wow. So yeah, I think I saw a video that was very similar to that. How it was a leather factory, and all the blood that was on the floor literally was running down the drain into the river out the back, and it was like, damn. And like you're right, that's what they just said. They just pay them off, so it doesn't matter. They just carry on. Crazy.
Yeah, the thing about the citizens organizing over there too. So what happens on the governmental level? They don't want it to appear that there's any fracturing in society. So you got some of these dishonest countryside officials. They're doing what you're saying. They're letting everything run in the river. They get caught. The people are caught because they were taking bribes. So then the citizens, people like you and me, we come out on the street and start protesting. Hey, you got all the stuff running in the river. I can't get my farm. All the dog, whatever, is all sick. Everybody. So instead of actually going up to the next level to take it to, all right, let's talk about this, they bring their private security police thugs in there to beat up all the protesters. And if they try to leave and go to a city capital to lodge a complaint, which they can do legally, or if they try to go to Beijing and lodge a complaint legally, they have the private security actually abduct them off trains and stop them from traveling to be able to lodge a complaint in a larger district, because then real people will start to come back and look. So they have their own little kingdoms and fiefdoms going on there, which is still kind of strange. Well, how they can prevent people from actually going out to protest and lodge complaints by literally kidnapping them and beating them up and keeping them home where they can't actually go do it. It still goes on to this day. Really, it's a really strange way it works over there, but water's a main contentious issue, and they've been exploring for a lot of something called primary water, which Deborah Tavares talked about at the AB 10 conference.
Yeah.
So think about a tree, and the tree comes up from all the roots from underground, and it comes up to the trunk. Well, if you rip that tree out of the ground, you got all those roots that are all over the place. I'll plunk it back in. All those roots are being fed, and let's say at the end of one of those roots is an aquifer. Could be something coming out of the side of a mountain. Could be actual pools of water under the earth or whatever it is. But that all is leading back to a primary source that's recharging, because they find that some of these aquifers, they're recharging, but they're recharging faster than what could be from the rainfall from above.
Yeah, that's right. They're not refilling fast enough, are they? That's
yeah. Some are refilling way faster than anticipated too. Like there's some oil wells that refill really fast as well. That's from pressure from some other source pushing it in there.
Yeah.
So they call this primary water because that's coming from like a main trunk vein, and what you see way out there at the end of an aquifer is just like the tip of an end of a root off the bottom of the root ball on a tree. So what they're trying to do is trace these back to where the original like trunk water source is. And there's a couple around the world. It's called primary water, and I encourage you to look into this.
I will do, yeah.
Primary water sources. And there's one in Libya.
Ah.
There's one in China as well. And there's two in the United States. And you start to take a look at these areas around the world where there's Argentina has one. And it's kind of there's only been 4 or 5 of these identified across the planet. They call them primary water sources. Deborah Tavares has done a real amazing amount of study on where these are located, how governments are, drawing from these sources, but it's still all about control, because we're told it's a finite resource. It only comes from above. It can get polluted, but there's 3 times more water in the crust of our Earth than there are on all the oceans and lakes and rivers combined on the surface that we're seeing. As you go swimming in the lake or whatever you do, canoeing on a river.
I didn't know that. Actually.
There's 3 times more water under the crust of the earth than there is in all the oceans combined. So that seeps out in some places, this other water. So Noah's Flood's a good one too, because Noah's Flood, these accounts talking about water just spurting out of the earth, and obviously there was something going on with the earth's crust having some ripping or tearing, and this water just starts flowing out. Plus they had the huge amount of rain from above. So I'm saying this had something to do with something in the solar cycle was going on that was much heavier and more powerful. Maybe it was like a once in a 6,000 year event or 12,000 year event, something like this. But it was recorded as water coming from the earth itself, coming out, flooding, and also from above.
Yeah.
And that cloud layer was up there for 40 days straight of clouds or more. Actually, it took years to come out of the sky, but at least the account was written down by every culture across the planet.
It was.
Can't have that much water coming out of the earth unless it's something different,
Yeah, you're right. So I wasn't aware. I didn't put those things together, but no, that appears to make a lot of sense. I like you said, the cataclysm is literally, it's almost on the very tip of our knowledge of history. It's out there, it was recorded, and there's very little to say. There's very little evidence of it, but the accounts have been recorded. Like you said, Noah's Flood. It ends up in the stories of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Rainbow Serpent in Aboriginal places, the Norway, talking about it in North America, the Ojibwe, it's in their book. So this event was recorded worldwide, a worldwide flooding of water, and what happened. And I guess that led to the ending of civilizations in some areas, and it appears that some civilizations went to certain places around the world and tended to reseed their culture. That appears to be a big movement. And, that ties in quite nicely with things like the Younger Dryas impacts that happened around 10,600 BC, where we were bombarded by some comets from the Taurine meteor stream, which comes around twice a year, of course. And, that you can see that the effect of we literally live in cycles, and these things will happen again. We just don't know when, but they will happen. But in regards to the solar cycle, that is happening every year, really.
Yeah, you mentioned the Younger Dryas. You ever take a look at Douglas Vogt's work, VOGHT?
I can't say I have. No, what's he tied to that?
Well, he's saying he's trying to tie the Younger Dryas event within a small micronova or mini nova from our own sun.
Okay.
Not to the point where the sun blows apart or anything, but it loses its outer energy plasma density and rips off all at the same time.
I know who you're talking
massive,
about.
Energy particle wave to us. It even had glass spherules in it. So right at this Younger Dryas boundary, they're finding all these glass beads inside there.
Yes.
And they find them on the moon as well. So if it was a Younger Dryas meteor impact, perhaps it was both, because probably something got ripped in and dragged in with us, because you can't imagine that much energetic particle wave coming and not pulling other stuff in with it, right?
Absolutely.
It's got to be like a vacuum effect. So it could have been both. But anyway, he was saying, all right, what happens if you get 1,700 degrees Celsius from one of these micronovas for like 6 hours on the Pacific side of the ocean? How much water would that evaporate? And how much cloud cover would that cause? It wouldn't come out for centuries, Dre. It wouldn't come out of this. And it would plunge the Earth back into a cold period as well for several hundred years until all that water actually made its way out of the cloud bands in the skies. So there's a few things going, and I'm very fascinated by this Younger Dryas era. All the climate debate stops before that time because they never want you to see that temperature could drop 15 C and then rise 12 C in just a matter of it went up that far in 10 years. It went up from, you have to find where you want to start your baseline measurements at, but the actual temperature rises with 10 degrees Celsius in 10 years. And they found this to be astounding. It's stupendous. But what's even scarier is the drop off into that thing only took 1 year and it went down 15 degrees Celsius in a single year.
That's right,
so something cataclysmic happened at that time. But nobody wants to talk about these temperature rises that quickly. And they sure don't want to talk about the 8,000 year cooling or the 6,000 year, the Minoan warming period, Roman warming period. They never want to talk about any of this because it was warmer back then than it is now. And it's all way too inconvenient. So where do they start their climate analysis of when it's getting super hot? 1600s. Of course, you're coming out of a mini ice age.
Yeah.
They don't ever go back that far in history to take a look at the real climate record. Oh, we're causing all this warming. We're causing all this warming.
I mean, we used to grow grapes in the UK. We used to grow tropical fruit here. It's certainly in our northern bands. I mean, I've seen that information, and that's we don't do it anymore because our climate doesn't support that in this country any longer.
Oh, but I thought it was the warmest temperatures ever.
Yeah, you would think so. You'd think so. But man, I can remember reading a document and regarding which about the jet streams and so on. We used to have this jet stream that used to go over the UK. It used to literally go over Ireland, over Scotland, and it would obviously hit into Sweden. And in the last 5 years, that belt has come down, and now it comes over the UK, and that's why we get these massive. We're getting storms now that we haven't had in quite some time. We had one yesterday. And it's really interesting because the media likes to name the storms now as well, so they're much more media friendly, like Storm George and Storm Gertrude. It's like, why are you naming them? Is it just to create a sticking point that people are aware of them, or is it you won't forget that the climate is changing?
Both.
Yeah. So,
hey, George was because of global warming.
Yeah.
Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does. Because I did see was it last year or the year before was the first hurricane that was reported in the southern hemisphere that touched land in Brazil. There was a record number of hurricanes that hit the US over the last couple of hundred years as well. I think so, a couple of years. I think it was 12 last year, was it?
That was pretty low on the landfall. So wind speeds, though, then it'll get you there because some of those wind speeds last week that ripped across the Caribbean, geez, well, I would not want to be anywhere close to that thing. Pushing 200 miles per hour on the average wind speed. That wasn't even a gust. Ooh. Some of the gusts were pushing 220. That's insane. Gusts at 210, 180. Just imagine the baseline speed and then whoosh, something comes in 30 miles an hour faster at over 200 miles an hour. Wow. Yeah, you just don't see that normally.
No, that's so are we going to see an increase in that, do you feel?
The jet streams, yes, pushing climate into new places. The vorticity, and that would be the electrical speed. So you got to realize, you got to come back into the electrical nature of these storms. It's not just because we got wind blowing that these storms form and they get so intense. There's some electrical connection as well happening within these. That's the differential in how these things spin. They're electrically driven. So if there's these massive changes electrically in our atmosphere, of the coupling of the sun to our Earth, and as the sun decreases its activity state, the Earth is more highly charged. So there's more atmospheric charge, if you will. And then since our magnetosphere is so weak, we can get more coupling coming in from the sun down these field line currents. Now sometimes these will not roll straight down the poles. You'll start to see them hit different places on the planet around these subtropical equatorial zones. And if a hurricane's forming, you'll find that when there's an increased charge from the sun, depending on if it's solar, if it's a coronal hole or if it's actually a CME or whatever we got going on there from the sun energetically, you'll start to find that there's amplification. They find a lot of times these storms really ramp up when we are seeing a lot of space weather come in. Electrical connections. So the answer is nobody has the answer yet. We'll have to give it a couple more years to see if this electrical equilibrium that's happening between the Earth and the sun is going to actually have some more effects on the storms in terms of how much faster they're going to spin electrically.
Okay.
That's about the best answer I gave you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just quickly looking around your document, actually, talking about the cosmic rays are intensifying, and there's an article here, a chart that you've put up from March 2015 to January 2016, and the cosmic rays that were coming to the Earth and hitting the surface was increasing, and cosmic rays increased due to lower solar wind hitting out the planet's atmosphere and lower cloud formation from 15,000 to 18,500 feet, increasing more snowfall and rainfall.
That's Heinrich Svensmark. That's his work.
That's right.
He's the genius who put that all together, Heinrich Svensmark. Now you can find the latest readings from 2019 for the cosmic rays as well. If you put in your browser, whatever you like, you will find the newest cosmic ray density measurements from 2019, and they measure different parts around the world. There's one right up near Oslo, a couple in the United States. There's one in Washington State, one in California, a couple down in South America. But you can see that the cosmic rays have increased globally to what you saw in that 2016 chart, far above that now, for sure, far above that.
Yeah, so I was looking at what that looks at now. I'm not sure that unit I have to say on the left-hand side. UGY/per hour. I'm not quite sure what the measurement of that is. But yeah, that...
Can you read that? What the per hour that's used?
So it's UGY.
That's the amount of density inside a cubic kilogram or a cubic centimeter of how much particle density is coming in.
Okay.
So you can measure these particles. They're electrical particles, like they're particles. They're made of stuff, literally, that you can measure them by. So they talk about cubic meter measurements. So let's talk about whatever's coming off. The proton density is another good one off the wind there. If you go to like spaceweathernews.com or something like this, you can get a full rundown of what the wind speed is coming off the sun, and we're starting to see decreases in that. They just had a huge solar event, but there was no sunspots or CME. It was just a hole in the sun creating massive disturbance in the ionosphere. And that's to be expected, too. Our magnetosphere is getting so weak that anything from the sun is causing bigger changes now. So they're getting, I don't know, like northern lights, if you will, aurora borealis, from nothing. Literally nothing should be causing those, except it's just a coronal stream blowing sun, not even really particles in too much. It's just, you think of a CME blew off, that we would definitely get some pounding on the poles. You would see some sort of lights in the sky. When you see the reds, it's really intense particle density, really heavy energy coming in. Most people see usually the greens, something like this. That's the normal color. Purples and reds, that's dangerous. With all those other colors up there, you get some nice blues and greens, depending on what the isotopes they're hitting in the atmosphere. Yeah, but even the smallest disturbance in the sun now is causing huge effects on our planet. So I can't even imagine, if we got like an X flare come in right now, it would be something like an X10 or X20 with the effect, compared to what it would have been in the 1990s. Yeah, we'd have had some electrical outages and gotten some really intense aurora, But our Earth could have fended that off pretty well. But now, with like shields down, Scotty, pretty much. Really, seriously, I'm not even making a joke about that. It's going to continue to get lesser and lesser and lesser protection around our Earth as we march forward through the next 15 years.
So coming out of that then, so will that ramp back up to a higher level of shielding, as it were, and more protection? Is that so? How long does this the cycle last, as it were? So in this 400-year solar minimum, or whatever it is we're going through next, how long do you think that will last? And then what do you think the time scale will be coming out of that recovery period, shall we say?
Well, a lot of people are putting it around 2045. I was saying 2035 originally, where we would be out of the worst of it, and we would start to come back through. Now, there's a whole range from early 2040s into 2060, somewhere around there. It'll be approximately similar to what we would experience in the Maunder minimum, where it started to. There was a step down, and people really started to notice around 1640 or so that, whoa, we got some serious problems in our own culture here. This is back, 1640. Everybody knew how to repair their own things. They all had their own animals. They grew their own food. They knew everything. They were the most hardy people comparatively to what we have today. And they were having a very difficult time by 1640, and they understood that things had shifted or were shifting.
Yeah, I'm just in my own head thinking about, so what in, say, the UK, right, when we're going through that tumultuous period between, like, royalty and the people, like the Cromwell versus like Charles and stuff, where the whole country flipped into a civil war, and that's literally it's in the back pocket of most people's minds that we kind of still exist in that system now, where we have an equal footing between Parliament and the royal family, shall we say, and how that will be flipped on its head again. Should we go into this into the system coming through from 2023, as you're saying, as people like challenge?
Yeah.
They want food.
Well, the challenges will begin in the 2023-24 harvest season. The awareness will be here in 2021, but we're just going to repeat history. That's about as good I can tell you. We'll repeat history for sure. It'll be a bit different because nobody knows how to do anything these days. I read this article, millennials, these are the millennials in the United States. Less than half of them have a screwdriver in the house. Less than half. Not even one screwdriver in the house.
That is pretty crazy. It's true.
That's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. But when you look around, like the technology around the house now, you probably couldn't fix anything anymore. Everything's very designed in a way that you either have to throw it away and buy another one due to planned obsolescence, or you just simply couldn't fix it because the people who made it don't want you to, or because it's too complicated to, because there's a lot of tech in there. I don't think
that's true. Remember when?
No, you go ahead.
I was trying to tell a friend of mine, when we, would get a new appliance when we were kids, my dad would always let us take it apart because they were going to give it away, throw it away anyway, right? So we had a nice toolbox. My dad always had a lot of nice tools around. We would spend days taking that thing apart. Shock your fingers, plug something in that shouldn't have been, cut yourself a little bit here, but you learned about all these things.
You did, yeah.
And then trying to put it back together. Okay, so we got to take it apart, but then Dad's like, you got to kind of put it back together so we can take it out in one piece and then put it out so somebody can take it. So then the whole thing of taking it apart was super fun, but then your brain had to come and like at least put the big parts back together enough where you could get it out to the front where somebody could take it, right? Like this is all kind of the learning curve in being able to repair and DIY stuff yourself. But it seems that that's a lost skill. And moving forward, those are the kind of skills we're going to need even more, is to be able to just come up with solutions. Could I make a grow tube that I described to you out of my back balcony that I have? Pretty much yes, if I could find the right kind of stainless steel piping. If I could have somebody help me solder that thing in there, and if we could find coconut coir, hey, why don't we use a different kind of, we could probably use leaves, we could probably use anything that decomposes that's heavy and thick that you could jam in the tube enough where it's really tight together. And I'm sure out of all of us thinking together, we could come up with a plant species that's not too acidic, where we could jam something in those pipes to be able to grow just like the coconut coir does, the coconut fiber. DIY, we got to think about DIYing, but nobody does this any longer. It's very difficult for people to, there's a skill set loss. Got to think about the hardiness of 1650s, 1680s people compared to today. It's a whole different ballgame.
You're not wrong there. You're not wrong. I mean, I don't even think today most people can repair a bike, let alone anything else. They're more complicated. And that's a worry.
Yeah. Jeez. What do you see? What's your biggest concern moving into this? Because you've learned a lot more. I mean, obviously you have a way better take on, the workings of what's coming in our very near future.
Yeah.
So for you, I mean, you have kids, and so what are you thinking about yourself in terms of, like, what's your biggest thing you're thinking about now?
My kids are growing up. My worry is, I mean, where I live in an apartment, so I'm like first floor up. So I'm like, what can I do in my space is the kind of thing I'm thinking about. So what can I do here? I mean, I guess I could have some plant boxes or growth boxes, but is it more, or do I have to invest in land? Should I invest in buy a patch of, like, it could be wasteland and take over and build there? Is that what I'd like to do? It probably is what I'd like to do. And then obviously manage to grow food at that location. I mean, that's probably what I'm thinking now.
Yeah, you have to think about protecting that too, and being far enough away where people just won't drive up and then find you and say, "Hey, give me your stuff."
Oh, or else, yeah. How do you protect yourself? We're not allowed to carry firearms in the UK, and every kid is carrying a knife these days. You've probably seen that news, right? I don't know if you have. I mean, it appears that every child in the country is carrying a knife or some kind of weapon, because they stopped stop and search over here. It's awful, actually. And now there's, like, gangs, like, kind of like Roman warlords, effectively, with a little clan around them in every area of each city. It's pretty incredible to know that that's actually the case over here right now. So I can only imagine what they're going to be picking up and taking. Oh, they've got food. I'll go over there with my little Mad Max-like clan and go and take it.
Yeah, and imagine they're not using those knives for something productive. No. When we were kids, we'd always be whittling things and, I don't know, just making stuff, cutting wood and playing with, because we were very safety conscious as a kid. Having a knife today, you give your kid a knife, and somebody from Child Protective Services in America would call them, they gave their kid a knife, like, it's so dangerous.
It's a tool.
But, when you're a kid, a pocket knife, flick that thing open, carving stuff, whatever. You could do soap, you could do wood, some stuff. You could cut a branch, you could make a tent, you could do all kind of things. Make a fort. You ever hear of making a fort when you were a kid? Make your own tree house and stuff.
Yeah.
But, knives, people don't know how to use them so much these days. And
they've only got one function.
A lot of criminals have the knives, but do you know how to play chicken with a knife? I mean, jeez, that's what it comes down to. It sounds like you're talking about in the country there.
Yeah.
Playing chicken with a knife, right?
But it's true. It's
that game chicken, where you hold on as long as you can before the next person backs off, like cars, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but it's true. People don't know how to use it as a tool anymore. I mean, I used to have knives as a kid. I'd modify a knife that I'd get out of the kitchen. I would sharpen it up, and I'd find tools and uses for it. And I never saw it as a weapon. I saw it as a tool, and as I still do today. And I would like going camping. I would take my knife. But now you can't even carry if you're caught by the police and they happen to search you for whatever reason. They ask you to stop, and you've got a weapon on you. That's now an instantly arrestable offence. You can't even take a knife from the shop. There's this kind of strange kind of grey area that's existed in the UK now, is that if you buy a knife from the shop, technically it's illegal to carry it until you get home. And if they stop you, it's down to the officer's discretion whether they'll arrest you or not. And you're like, you what? But that's actually the case.
I want to go camping, officer. You can see all my gear in the back of my Jeep. No. Come on now. Let me go.
An officer's like, well, my arrest quota this week is down. You're coming with me.
Oh, that's so sick. I know. Again, the way our society is revolving is nothing more about control and money. And it's almost like we've reverted back all the way to these becoming serfs in a kingdom somewhere, where, the dukes and the lords had zero culpability. They were beyond a reproach, and there was nothing anybody could do. It's pretty much now the same thing with the police and the judges, these upper echelon of money earners, and then we got to the government and the royals you're talking about. Are you kidding me? Nobody ever questions. They rarely go to jail. They're beyond the laws. They have their own set of rules, but then they're trying to crush everybody else down to be complete subservient serfs, and that's it. If you don't control, we're going to take your voice. We're going to take your platforms. We're going to take your money. You're going to deplatform, deperson you, and you're going to be a non-person non grata, and don't just be quiet and go away.
Yeah, be quiet, go away. Don't you dare talk out of a line.
No. I do.
Yeah,
because I have my own beliefs about the grand solar minimum, and I think that we need to be talking about this because the solutions that we need to arrive at together far outweigh the cost of being silent on this. I mean, what's the most they can do? Take away your money? Big deal.
Yeah.
Go find another way to make money. Because it's not about that. It's about using your mind and having the motivation to find a niche to go do something, right? So if they cut down one avenue, it's not about that. It's about you still have your same mind. It's about finding that value to give to others and get the motivation and find your target and just go right at it. So, I mean, they can keep you down for a very small amount of time because the mind is more powerful than anything that they can throw at us. And I think that's what they fear so much is the populace coming together and organizing, using their brains, using their mind, their focus, their energy, and then really coming up to ask some hard questions and putting into motion a lot of action plans. And I think that scares because, you got to realize how many elite are there on the planet compared to the regular persons. How many police or army are on the planet compared to regular persons?
That's right, yeah.
How many judges are there compared to the populace?
Yeah.
Very few. Probably like 1/8 of 1/5 of 1/8 of a percent or something like that overall, comparatively. So if everybody organized, things could stop in a second. Like in Hong Kong right now. Are you familiar with what's going on in Hong Kong right now with the massive marches over there?
I'm aware of the marches happening, but I don't actually know what they're about. I haven't looked. Because I guess our news is kind of a streamline away from such things. Could you give me a bit of a heads up?
Yeah, so today's numbers, 1.5 million people on the streets in Hong Kong marching.
Wow.
Closing down the entire city. They're like they're advising Taiwanese not even go down there because as soon as you fly in the airport, after you get off the train, you're not going anywhere.
So I just tell the word Hong Kong.
The whole thing is about this extradition new law that's coming in. Remember, Hong Kong was supposed to be autonomous. It was supposed to run with its own independent electorate, independent government, independent media, independent council, independent law, and everything on its own outside of Chinese control.
Okay.
Yeah, right. That lasted a long time, didn't it? Now they want to pass a new law. It's an extradition treaty where if you say anything against China that China deems an offense in China that you could be arrested for, could be state secrets. Maybe somebody sends me a video like they did. They sent me the... now, a person sent me a couple of videos out of China that they would be arrested for and sent to prison for sending me these videos. It was about the pig virus quarantine and all the dead bleeding pigs all over the streets. And when China was saying it was okay and there was no virus and it was totally okay, this person was walking around videoing pigs bleeding out of the nose, just dropping over dead. He got dozens and dozens of pigs just up this like one less than a mile area in the countryside they drove in. Just pigs laying all over the sidewalks, dead, bleeding out of the snouts, and people walking around trying to spray everything. But no, it's under control, and we don't have any. So anyway, even if I showed that video on my YouTube channel outside China, if I went to Hong Kong and they could actually identify me, they could come and arrest me and take me into China for revealing state secrets.
Wow.
That's me as a foreign dude running around. Can you imagine what the Hong Kong citizens are facing the same thing? If they speak out against Chinese politics, Chinese rulership, anything against Chinese economics, showing up the corruption, that's a state secret. So anything that the Hong Kong was going to do in the newspapers or as individuals on social media outside of the Chinese firewall, they were still held under the same rule of Chinese law as people inside China. So they'd be abducted in the middle of the night. And now they're trying to make it legal where they can come in and arrest anybody, any crime, including you and me, for talking negatively or affecting China or affecting the one of those. They have all these catchy phrase, harmoniousness in society. They can even take foreigners now. This is what the law was about. So Hong Kong's back's against the wall, and they just realized right this second, we stand and we fight now, or we go down forever. Because once they pass this law, anybody who ever speaks out in the media will be arrested and taken into China. They're going to close down, just like social media is being closed down with the tech giants across the West. This new law would allow China to censor and completely close down anybody who ever talks out about against China ever again. In Hong Kong, or if you ever fly through Hong Kong, they can come into the airport and grab you and arrest you, period. This would shut down all discourse about anything going on in terms of rights, freedoms, freedom of speech, or whatever happens in Hong Kong at all, forever. Their country's gone. They realize it. So they have just, I think China woke up a sleeping tiger over there.
Wow.
Everybody's out on the streets. And my girlfriend told me that, as far as she knows, this is the way it's been phrased to her. They fight now, or they all die. And all of them are coming out to fight. They're not going to stop. This thing is not stopping until China backs out of there. So this is going to be a historical,
It also says
absolutely historical event. You need to keep your eyes on this thing.
I'm looking at this now, and there's like countries that have a long-term transfer agreement with Hong Kong including
Yeah.
Australia, Britain, Canada, Czech Republic, France, Finland, Singapore, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and so yeah, I'm actually looking at a full breakdown of where the current extradition agreement after the amendment, and yeah, you're right. It looks like everyone who, if you even question China, it's extraction.
Yes, extraction. That's for you and me. Every country you just read from that list, United States, whatever is on that list, our citizens too can be extracted out of Hong Kong for talking ill about China. That's scary. That's like the Department of Justice in America going after anybody overseas for securities or money laundering or anything that the DOJ wants to go after. They can go investigate in any country. You see what's happening in the Dominican Republic now there with the American tourists ending up dead with poisoning. They can run anywhere on the planet and grab anybody they want to at any time. Well, China is just doing the same thing. If this law passes, it will be the equivalent of what America does globally to extract and get anybody, extradite anybody at any time from any country at all, period. China will be able to do the same thing legally. They can come in and grab you at any time, anywhere.
Wow, that's
so this is what they're fighting for. They're fighting to keep their country. And I think if every global citizen knew what was happening, they would probably fly down and try to, push the edge over on Hong Kong. But you can't go anywhere. Man, it's so crazy down there. That millions of people blocking the streets. When it started just a few days ago, it was like around 1 million people, and then yesterday it was 1.2 or so. But today it's 1.5.
Yeah. So yeah, I just shared the article about the 1 million people on the streets there.
Yeah.
They
and the drone footage is sick. The drone footage is insane. You got to check out the drone footage. And then China keeps trying to say, no, it's like 100,000 people that were there. Nothing. Don't worry about it. They're not. It's only 100,000 people. But
yeah, it says here they expected 300,000. They got over 1 million that turned up. Wow, that's incredible.
So Taiwan's next on the list. The reason the Taiwanese are following this so heavily, because I'm living in Taiwan.
Yeah.
The reason that Taiwan is so heavily following, is so vested in this, if Hong Kong falls, Taiwan is next.
Yeah.
And they're not going to wait long. It's going to be like weeks before they try to do the same thing here. So not only this is a regional thing, and all the other smaller countries are very concerned and very interested in what's happening, because when one of them falls, it's like a tiger coming in and grabbing one prey animal, and then they all bunch together, and then there's 9, and then it jumps in again, and then there's 8, and then but now they're realizing if all 10 of us fight at the same time, we all go down together, or none of us go down. So same in Hong Kong, the citizens just got woken up greatly. They got shocked awake. Their country's gone, and they're going to disappear into the night, or they fight now.
Yeah, so.
And it should concern you as a traveler too. I don't care what you're saying on social media. I don't care what citizen you are from any country. If you talk ill about China, they can arrest you for that. They can arrest you in Hong Kong for that. And I know it's going to branch out, for sure, guaranteed. They're not just going to stop at Hong Kong. They're going to probably say, well, as agents, we can run around the planet and grab everybody who's speaking ill of China. So where does that leave you on social media, freedom of speech in your own country? It doesn't. You're at risk as well. Anybody who's ever posted ill about China is at risk of being abducted and brought back and extradited into China if you're passing through Asia somewhere.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's beyond incredible. It's scary. But again, it's part of this whole control mechanism of, you can already see the plays. Like, everybody's doing it. So what's so grandiose in the future coming at us that they need to extradite people, control all speech? You're not even allowed to talk about a government from a different country because they need to control it so much. You got all the tech giants trying to control everything. You got all these new laws coming in to control everything. What is going on that these governments see in the future that's such a detriment to us speaking and us taking action that they're willing to close down the entire planet so we don't get organized or even talk about these things? See, everybody sees it on the horizon, what's coming. The death loss that we were looking at anyway was 2 billion people not going to make it to 2030. So like the government's behaving recklessly, it would just make sense. Everybody's posturing because the loss of life, it's going to be triage. It's not even going to be trying to help people through. It's going to be full triage. And they're looking at a loss of at least 2 billion. So as all this is going down, you can see why governments just don't care, because there'd be so much loss of life anyway.
Yeah, I can see that kind of like, well, we'll take a few hundred now, but down the line we'll lose far more. So what's it matter? And there's a real worry about how different countries can control. Because I was watching I don't know if I was watching it on Reddit. Sorry, it's talking about how China kind of dictates over Hollywood. And I was like, okay, what's this mean? And their particular example was the Marvel movies, how they're extremely popular, multi-billion terms of profit-making movies, but they're not allowed to mention China in a negative light in Hollywood at all, because of course China is the second biggest market in terms of money, people watching movies. So you're not allowed to negatively criticize or show China in a negative light in movies. So what that means is that movies are already kind of falling in line with China's kind of dictation, because you're not allowed to show them in a negative light. So all movies don't show them being criticized in any way, shape, or form. Otherwise, they like to face extraction, or they just simply won't be popular over there because they're not allowed to be. And then you see this on the back of that, this new society score system that has been implemented across China. Is it the societal? Was it society credit?
It's called social credit score.
That's right. Yeah. So those people who, of course, have seen the Black Mirror episode where I can't remember what its name is now. How the main character of that had a star rating system, and whether you were voted up or voted down affected what you can and couldn't buy, where you can and couldn't go, what you can and can't do, who you're allowed to have friends with. That actually is what China has in place now, and that's rolling out even further into the rural areas. That is extremely disturbing, is that you can't, if perhaps you couldn't pay your bill on time, you will lose credit points, which means you can't take out a credit card, and you can't, take the train, or you can't take the bus. You are now penalised for, not being a good citizen. What's more disturbing is that, of course, Nottingham shares, we're twinned with Beijing for our universities. So our city has a lot of Chinese students here, and I've asked them about the society system, and they all love it. They think it's a great thing that everyone should do. But I kind of worry, is it because they're not allowed to criticise it?
Correct. And now here's the whole thing. Because of the trade war with America, if you're caught going to an American restaurant, buying American products, they're lowering your credit score inside China now too. So this whole thing about even what products you can buy, your score is being lowered if you purchase American.
Oh, really?
That only started about 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. That's even over here, people talking about that in Taiwan. Because a lot of people work from Taiwan that work over there, and they're in the social credit system as well. Foreigners are too.
Oh, really? I was going to say, does that affect people who are traveling there? Okay.
I'll tell you a friend of mine, a guy named Tim. He lives in a city called Shenzhen, which is it's in the Pearl River Delta area. They were out, if you take the train all the way down from Lohu and you go all the way down, there's this district out at the beach. Well, it's like a small little beach down there. There's a bunch of restaurants and bars and things. But it was like 2 in the morning, and they were coming back, and they had to cross one part to get over, and there was a taxi on the other side of the road, but they didn't want to go down and cross on the light, so they just decided to jump across the middle and go against the red light. Well, he tells me within 15 minutes that they had him facially recognized, and they withdrew the fine of his money out of the We Pay Chat score, or the payment system that they have over there, had deducted the money from him, recognized him facially, all within 15 minutes.
That is pretty powerful stuff.
That's pretty insane. And then my girlfriend told me a story of a local woman who crossed against a red light. And what they're doing, since you mentioned countryside, I thought I'd bring this up. They're putting up these big billboards now. And if you cross or you do something illegal, what they do is they flash your picture, because obviously the camera got you. It facially recognizes you, and it puts up your big picture that you have for like your ID or something, shows your name, and then shows what the infraction was that you did to publicly embarrass you. And it only takes minutes.
Yeah, I saw there's a BBC show
minutes to facially recognize you, go through all your data, find out, and put all this in collated and put it on a big board. Because they've obviously gotten it down by, there's only, say 100,000 people in a city, and as soon as it runs through millions and millions of face recognitions in seconds.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, because there's a show over here called BBC Click. It's kind of a technology, gaming kind of, but mainly orientated around technology, gadgets and stuff. And they'd gone to Shenzhen, and they did that there. They had arranged with an official that he crossed the road in the wrong place, and then it actually appeared on the bus stop next to him that he literally was crossing the road illegally instead of using like the zebra crossing that there was. And that was to demonstrate how effective the technology is. It was like, damn, just How awful is that? You can't cross the road in the wrong place. But is that because they want people to be orderly?
I say they're doing this because they know the food shortages are coming, and I'm saying that for now it appears that it's social credit and communism and following the party line. But I am telling you right now, mark it on, I will even stand by this. By 2024, that will be used to determine who gets to eat in the country. Eat better foods and who has access to foods. By the citizen you are.
So let's tie into that point now. So we're talking about, say, smart foods. So, and the reason I'm going to interject and say that there is because now, of course, in the UK, there's a massive rollout of technology in regards to 5G. And I know that's what you mentioned earlier. We now want what's called the smart grid of things. They want everything in your house to be on the smart grid. Everything from your fridge to your cooker to your doorbell. And it's a kind of an interesting tracking way of who comes to your house, what they do here, how often you go to your fridge, how often you eat, what is it that you eat, because everything's tracked now. Well, it will be tracked of what they're saying. So when you buy healthy foods, and then how often you're using to cook with them, how energy efficient you are, all kind of that ties into that smart grid, and that's the kind of the warning that the 5G kind of opponents are talking about, is that this is the technology to what will become a concern later on. And it ties into what you just said there, how in China perhaps that's what will monitor food, as to whether you get or do not get food based on potentially what you've posted on social media, what's on your profile, where you've been, who you've associated with, will determine whether you get food. And that technology, listening to that and going, well, this is what the 5G opponents are saying, is that this smart grid is designed to monitor your health, where you go, what health insurance you get based on your lifestyle. That database, that technology, that big data, that they are building these pools of information. For what reason? And when you tie in that, that appears to make a coherent sense when those databases start talking to each other.
Who would you want to be in the new society as we come out through the other end, I guess, is the question. What kind of people would you want to be coming through to the other side? Would you grab anybody and pull them by the hand? Would you give them safe haven until we get to the other side of this whole grand solar minimum from start to finish? I mean, really, I think it's a determinant type of beta test to see who would be allowed to get the resources to make it through, because they want that kind of personality, or they want that kind of skill set or learning ability, or just pure subservience, or whatever it might be. Maybe they need a spackling of each one of those percentages of kind of people.
Yeah, you got to hit your diversity quota, should we say? Got to have one of you, one of you, one of you, and then
Noah's Ark, if you will. Yeah, Noah's Ark determined on your past, I wouldn't say performance, but just your past actions and your past behaviors, is a Noah's Ark to see how they can kind of recombine and recreate a new society as we get through. This is going to be tumultuous. And tumultuous is probably not even the closest word that we could use for it. I'm going to say it's just downright going to be
brutal, ruthless.
It's going to be a complete reset to everything you know, and a lot of people aren't going to be able to handle that mentally, financially, physically. So how are we going to rebuild on the backside when we come out? There's going to be way less people after we get on the 2035 end of things.
It's scary times. I guess this has been known for a long time to happen, isn't it? So what about the other elements that are pushing against this? I mean, I guess there's probably elements around the world that don't agree with how we're pushing towards the smart system, or we're going towards this system in China. And they perhaps see themselves as freedom fighters or warriors of some kind. And I don't want to label anyone particular, but there are those who are against the Western society, and they're certainly against the Chinese system. I say that just, again, the area I work in, the kind of things that I hear on a regular basis, they want systems overturned, and you go, are they just want it to go to anarchy? Because there appears to be a lot of anarchist-like people who just want to see the world fucking burn. It's scary.
Well, you got to think about how can any of these flashpoints be used as an excuse for a supply chain disruption?
Yeah. I was
not us, man. We were trying to grow the food. We grew it. We just couldn't deliver it. We tried to, but this thing happened over here. Not our fault. They stopped manufacturing. We're in a trade war with them.
Yeah, the trade war thing. I guess that keeps coming up on the peripheries of stuff like there's this sanction thing that's come out from Donald Trump recently. This putting a tax cap tariffs on stuff There's this thing that's happening in Mexico. I don't really know the details, in all fairness, so it would be unfair for me to talk about them. But is that also, is that to protect food lines, really, for the future? Or is that to pressure countries to subservience to them? To get food?
Perhaps, because one of my calls was that this whole thing between China and America is all fake. That as soon as this, whatever you call it, saber rattling between the two countries ends, I'm saying that the first trade deal that will be signed will be China importing an enormous amount of food from the United States. So watch if my call's correct. So we're going to go through this period here of, the ban of Huawei, a whole bunch of companies coming in and out. Apple says they're going to manufacture outside China. Great. There's going to be a whole bunch of countries coming home back to the United States to manufacture. China is going to understand that they were going to lose these market segments anyway because the grand solar minimum, there's going to be billions of less people buying their stuff. They're not going to have anywhere close to the economic growth. Everything's contracting already. And when you start subtracting hundreds of millions of buyers out of there, it's just going to contract anyway. So I'm saying that some of these larger governments are working in tandem together to make it appear as if there's much, friction on the surface when behind the scenes they're working together. And if I'm anywhere close to being correct, as soon as this trade war spat will finish with China, which it will finish, the first thing that you're going to see is a major, major gargantuan, maybe the biggest food deal ever from China buying from the United States. If I'm anywhere close to being, it's going to be something about food will be the first big major trade deal, and it will make headlines worldwide about how big the trade deal is, and it'll all be about food heading outbound to China from the United States.
Wow. Yeah. But I guess with America's food agriculture being hit by, was it 58% down? Is it because they can make more money by selling it than selling it domestically?
Well, it's just the planting is atrocious this year. The most rain we've ever had in America. It's the biggest floods that were ever recorded in America. We've got inland sea forming. You got all kind of inland river deltas forming. The Mississippi River is starting to break through and reform and go on a different direction in some areas. So they're trying to shore it up so the Mississippi River doesn't divert itself. Now, there's some serious things happening back there with this kind of flooding and the loss of the stored grain. Some analysts say it's 5% of the lost stored grains that we had last year, and then others are saying it was 38% of lost grain that was stored. Like I went and saturated in the all-time biggest floods ever. The planting season, I'm forecasting right now, and I'm doing a corn report, and I have been for the last couple of weeks here, investing in corn and these time of thing. Going back to the historical charts, we need to go back to precedents in history. Late 1960s, 68, and we'll go back to 1938. These are the two lowest planting periods ever for America. And you got to realize 1938 was not a lot of farming going on comparatively to what we have going on in the year 2019. The planting figures are lower than 1938 by 10 million acres lower.
Wow.
This is some incredible stuff we're getting into. This is uncharted, unprecedented territory. But yet again, the commodities prices aren't rising. It's just really interesting. I think there's more of a control mechanism going in than there is the monetary mechanism, because it seems they just don't care about the money. Because Kristian over at Ice Age Farmer was saying, David, you're looking at it from a logical mind. He says it's all about the control and the perception of enough food. Money's going to be worthless in a couple years anyway. It's the perception management of stability is going to be way more important until the year that they can't really deliver the food, which is going to be now, because they were talking about rationing corn going into the ethanol plants already. And I thought, when's the last time that happened? 2011 and 1994 and 5. They didn't have enough corn to supply all the domestic demand and meet the ethanol demand in 2011. So what they did was they curtailed back and they rationed how much corn was going into the ethanol producers. So we're already seeing this. They're starting to call for corn rationing for ethanol producers. And they're at the first week of taking a look. And some of these articles are saying, no, wait a second, you inspectors out there. You guys are looking at the 2 acres that came up out of the 300 acres that didn't get planted, totally flooded, and you're basing your entire projection estimates on 2 acres that you surveyed that's up. But what about the other 300 acres or 3,000 acres around you that's still under complete water and never got planted, will have zero production? And you're basing the entire harvest off 2 acres that you're surveying that looks kind of decent that got in on a high dry spot. And this is what's happening with these corn reports. And this is what I don't like. I actually disagree and I'm calling it out.
I got you. So they obviously have taken the area that was okay, and they've surveyed that. But of course, majority of the land is underwater and it's got water damage. So yes, the survey does indeed look, because obviously they scale up to mean, oh, we've got 60,000 acres or 5 million acres here, but actually you only did 2 acres and it wasn't very good. Man, that's so their projections effectively are false.
Correct, because they're not going to be able to plant in 36 million acres. They're going to go unplanted this year. 36 million acres unplanted due to flooding.
We've had that over here.
And they're talking about, and again, these corn projections per bushels per acre. Originally, they were saying it was going to be at 170, and now they've dropped that back down to like 164 or so based on these first field projections that they're seeing. But again, they're only using cherry picking like the best of the areas that actually aren't soggy, that got planted on a high spot. So when you come in, I'm going to say that 164 is a pipe dream, because how much more rain is coming? They're expecting 5 more inches over this next week, right in those same areas. So whatever's there is going to get flooded again. And anything that's up might get knocked down. There's ferocious winds, 80-mile-per-hour winds accompanying these fronts here. So even if it is up a foot, it's going to get knocked down again. So all these estimates are pure fiction to keep the market stable and to keep people trucking down the road, or just keep saving, keep buying, keep going to the game, and don't look anywhere else. Just everything's cool and stable. Keep going.
Because I always got the
opinion. I'm telling you right now, corn long, December 2019. Corn long, March 2020.
I always thought, and perhaps it's my perception, that America overplanted corn, and that's why they put corn syrup in everything, because they overproduce it, so therefore it's valued cheaper. I mean, am I mistaken in that?
You're not mistaken. And then also you need to add in ethanol production inside that. So that was one thing. They knew they could plant an enormous amount of corn, but then what other industries could they mandate by law that we would have to use it? Oh, ethanol production. By law, you have to put it in the car to save global warming. So again, during this Obama era, they did all these things where you're mandated to put the ethanol in the gasoline supply of America by law to save global warming. So there's your other need for the corn. Yeah, grow it up, but we got a need for it, the ethanol plants. Oops, now the ethanol plants aren't going to have enough because we need to eat, feed the animals. We're going to pull back in on the exports as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. See, this is another explanation, too. It's so strangely convenient that we have this huge trade war with China. China was a huge buyer of American corn. And now, oops, we just stopped suddenly magically exporting to China when we needed to cut our exports anyway because we're not going to grow enough this year. Magical timing. 2 birds, 1 stone. I'm wondering if it just wasn't planned.
You know what? That seems to tie together quite nicely, doesn't it? We simply just don't have it to export because we don't have it. There's a trade war coming on.
We don't. We really don't. And that's the thing that the markets aren't pricing in. Now, where's China going to get us? Now, I wanted to throw the wild card. China just lost 30% of its corn, and this is a super early estimate because the army worms are going unchecked there. Now, it's coming into the prime warm growing season. This is when the army worms expand naturally anyway. This is their highest growth spurt is these next 6 weeks.
Okay.
China doesn't have the pesticides in country right now to contain the armyworm outbreak in the corn crop. You know where that pesticide comes from? America. But they're having a trade war. So I'm wondering if it's not planned to let China lose all of its corn production too, and then we have to have some sort of massive food rationing, and then I don't know what's going on, but China's not going to grow it. America is way down. Brazil has an extra 100,000 tons. Whoop-de-doo. Where's all this corn going to come from?
If we don't have it, it doesn't exist. It's going to magically appear from nowhere. Because how long does corn take to grow? Is it like 6 months?
No, the corn planting usually would be over a month ago. Yeah, they harvest somewhere in September, October, depending on where you are, obviously, because the different latitudes where they're growing. So, for example, if you're in the United States, like you would put in, let's say, Kansas or Arkansas, somewhere further south, way earlier in the year. So your harvest would come way earlier because it went through that growth and maturation period.
Okay.
But if you're way up in like northern Michigan or somewhere up in Ontario or up in Canada, right at the border there, your planting season's way later. So obviously the maturation is going to be far later too. So your harvest season will come somewhere at the end of September, early October.
I mean, you might be able
So
to help me with
like,
something as well. So I was under the understandings, I guess the perception of America to the world is that most farms are still kind of driven by families, but are most American farms now corporation owned?
yeah, the bankruptcy rates have been just atrocious for the smaller farmers, and this year's even worse because they were totally put out of business, and I feel so bad for the local families there. They can't. A lot of places there, farm machinery was just purely washed away. B, the investment that they had already put into the seed. Okay, so they're out on credit as well. They got everything for this year's planting on credit, and maybe they got it last year too, the machineries, the upgrades, all these facilities, whatever. And this year wiped everybody out. So if you didn't get the insurance from a private insurer, then you got wiped out. And the government programs are minimal at best. Some private insurers didn't pay because they ran out of funds, or they just purely said we're not going to insure anybody anymore because of the last year's losses. So everything's being consolidated under these giant mega farms. So let's say you're a family farm, you have 800 acres, and you just went out of business. Well, Cargill or somebody's going to be there to swoop you up in 2 seconds, but they're going to pay you minimal amount. They're going to go below market price. Look at your fields; they're all flooded. They're full of debris. We got to refurbish the fields. That's going to cost X, Y, and Z amount. Do you want to sell your land, or do you want to have the bank confiscate it and you get no money? So it's a huge consolidation play at the moment by all these major agribiz people. Again, convenient timing. I don't know what's going on here, but this consolidation play this year too is like the biggest consolidation of farms planned ever in America, from the transference of landholding from what you're talking about, the small family farmers, into giant agribusiness. It's the biggest transfer of land ever. So how is it possible that all these things are culminating in the same year here? Yeah, incredible. And we're heading into the food shortages coming up in just a couple years. So whoever controls the food, like if a mega business controls the food, and look at all these other supermarkets and all these other chains going vertical. You mentioned vertical anyway. Look at Walmart. They want to deliver groceries to your house, to your refrigerator now.
Yeah. Oof. Scary stuff. I mean, like, it
is.
I guess like I said, the perception of the world is that America's farms are all family owned and they're all like all wholesome and jolly Kansas folk. But like I said, if the corporations own the majority of the farms, have now been transferred into corporate hands. It does play into the view now that they need that's corporately what they'll be trading at now, will be on that kind of stuff. Because so a couple of years ago we had the whole thing between Monsanto and Bayer. Bayer bought Monsanto out, and I know they're considered to be the great evil in the world. So does that make Bayer, because they're a German food supplier, aren't they? And they own most of the European farms, to my knowledge. If Bayer bought Monsanto, who own most of the American farms, does that now mean they're the world's biggest food producer? I might be reading that wrong. I'm not sure.
It would be, and then take a look who's consolidating who in the food distribution chains, because everybody's getting gobbled up as well.
Yeah.
So supermarkets are getting gobbled by health food and whole food producers, and everything's just getting consolidated in this very, very, very tight stream of who controls the world's food supply. So again, marching into 2023, 24, whoever controls the food controls society, because there's going to be so little of it. And imagine if it's just these big companies that control the food. They could tell governments what to do. No, we're not going to give you food. Go invade. You do this for us. Then we'll give you food for your citizens. Or else, don't talk to us. You go get overthrown. We're going to go over here.
I guess they already do that already, don't they? There's like, isn't that
they
part,
do that already?
Wasn't that part of the TTIP plan as well? That TTIP allowed basically corporations to charge governments when they are not achieving prospective sales or prospective money, if a government plan blocked them from making any money. And obviously, while the TTIP plan fell apart, we're now seeing effectively behind the scenes the EU Defence Union and the EU Union. It kind of already still is in place under the same, just under many different names, but it's now this bilateral uniformity unions. I mean, technically TTIP did pass, but not under the name of TTIP. Yeah,
look at these military forces responding. It's almost like militaries walking in for occupation to just put down uprisings, because I think that's all militaries are going to be used for.
Yeah, I think
in about 5 years from now, it's just to quell uprisings. That's all they're going to be used for. Private armies for uprising quelling.
I do think there is an element of that. I think that national armies and national border forces and security services are almost very small now because governments can't afford to run them. So a lot of those military people are going to the PMCs. They're going into private military contractors.
Where's your allegiance? Because I'm sure not going to shoot an American citizen if they were hungry and I'm a soldier. Won't do that. Very few people will cross that line.
But of
Probably,
course,
in my own opinion, in the entire American military, there would be less than 5% of the people that would shoot on their own citizens, hungry ones coming for food. Like, you would know the situation at that point. All right, we're trying to hold this line here. We're trying to protect this warehouse. We're trying to, I don't know, protect this rail depot. We got food coming in here, whatever it is. There could be a million situations. But when it's all basing around food, and everybody understands that there's a lot of hunger out there and people are rioting because of hunger, and there's so many hunger issues, and basically everything crumbling in society is because of hunger and lack of food and screaming high food prices. I just don't think American soldiers would fire on American citizens because of the hunger thing. Like, give us food, we need food. They start shaking on the gate, like, give us food. I really highly doubt very many American soldiers would open fire on our own citizens, hungry ones no less. But bring in a foreign invasion force, and perhaps they would, because they talked about that in the EU. I mean, what happened with the yellow vests? That's not even French police in there anymore. That's like Eastern European, whatever, soldiers now in there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think there were Bulgarian soldiers who were beating up some French citizens. And I've now seen like snipers are up on the roofs and stuff. There's now like live firearms now being distributed out. It's scary stuff. I think it hit 31 weeks this week that they've been protesting on a Saturday. But like, I got a friend who lived in Paris. They've actually since moved away, and they says like France is pretty much a war zone anyway. Before all this happened, just because there's like people living on the streets. There's like organized militias roaming around. It's not the romantic Paris that they moved into, and now this has taken a whole new action on it. They said that you can't actually go to the Eiffel Tower because there's literally like concrete blocks all around it, so no one rams it. It's just like, what the hell?
No.
Yeah.
But again, they depopulated the food grow zones. So remember, the stability of a society that's going to crumble anyway is like the last thing they're going to try to do is keep our society stable. It's going to crumble. You just have to understand that. And where's your protection in that? By knowing it's going to crumble, that's your safety right there, is it won't catch you off guard. And you'll totally understand why it's happening. So you can make wiser, better choices by knowing the catalyst for everything, the way governments are probably going to react, and then you can find your own solutions moving the other way. Versus waking up one day and everything's crumbling, and you're like, why is this happening? I don't know, we got to run. Well, hold on. You should have made better choices. If you could have understood it, we could have come to the solutions. But, and that's my firm opinion, the governments want as much loss of life, property, and freedoms as much as they can possibly get out of this natural event. Otherwise, they would have warned us. They haven't. And we're into the first year now with the food losses, and that's happening across the planet. So this is my first year and what I would consider check the box of we are absolutely losing food production now because of the grand solar minimum, to the point that by the end of the year, I'm saying much higher food prices by December, and $7 corn by December, which is up from maybe $4.30 or so. So it's the first year in earnest. So when we get down the second year and the third, when I get into the 2023-24, ouch, we are in a whole new world. In 2028, you got all these solar physicists screaming to the governments, you got to stockpile food now because we're not going to be able to grow enough in 2028 to even supply 20% of the planet. So you guys need to start stockpiling food right now to try to get us through 2028 to 2032. And these are solar physicists saying this.
That's cool.
I'm talking about 2021 through 2023, and then that 4-year period of tumultuous time, and then we get into what the solar physicists are telling us. We're going into global food shortages for those 4 years. Nobody's talking about this. I just don't understand why. So the more disturbed society is, the more control they can put in. It almost makes sense because there would be a reason for police forces on the street. You would love it. You'd be like, bring more police, bring more army, keep us safer, man. Look at all these food riots going on. We need more police. So I think that they're just going to let it go. then they'll have an excuse to implement all these plans that they've been wanting to, that you see in all these crazy movies since the 1960s about societal control. Perhaps they'll get their way, but I really don't think so, because energetically the universe doesn't work that way. The vibration frequency of the sun's changing, and the same vibration frequency field that those dark energies are holding into, we're going to scream out of that. So maybe they could grab in and hold that field, whoever's left here vibrating on the same dark energies with them, but a lot of us are just going to right above that, so they're decaying or will decay as we move forward with the changes in the sun. I just lost both lights here, so and we got a little darker. Ooh, sunset time.
Someone's been watching you and turning off his lights. He can't see the lights. So look, dude, shall we round it up there, or shall we finish on some kind of high spot really about the future?
We should finish on a high spot. That's what I was trying to do, is bring in the vibrational frequency changes. And what do you think about that? What's your take on the actual frequency of the sun changing, because we're electromagnetic beings ourselves, and the electromagnetic frequency of the sun's changing. And we know through history, things go through enlightenment, they go through dark ages, there's golden ages, there's dark ages, and we're coming into a vibrational change yet again. So you're a fan of history. What do you think?
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? How do we go through ages of enlightenment, not because of biology, but actually because of a frequency in our own brain that gets sparked up a bit higher. Our own charge gets more creative because I guess we have to adapt. It'll be nice to consider. I say nice in I'm not quite sure what way. We have to adapt. That's certainly what's going to have to come, isn't it? So we're going to have to go through this period of a low period, shall we say? We're going to push through this. I know, like you said, if we're not going to be able to supply food to 80% of the world's population by that point, how do we make sure that we are one of those 20%? What do we have to go through, actually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and I guess electrically, if we're talking about that as well, frequency-wise, to survive that tumultuous period, and then to come out of the other side in a new way of enlightenment? And I guess to be on the other side of that, well, you're probably going to have an entire different perspective on everything in history, if you are one of those who've come out of that other side. And who knows what that could look like. I would think and I'd hope to be that we come out of that a lot wiser to history, and a lot wiser to ourselves, listening to the survival. Because I guess we're going to go through a massive period of grief coming out of that worldwide grief that actually might bring the world together in a way that's unprecedented. Because I guess we live in an interconnected world. The technology will still be there to talk to each other, bilaterally and internationally, potentially, or the infrastructure might fail and collapse. But it'll be nice to know, it'll be good to consider that we could come together at the end of what that could be. And that gives me some hope. But then there's the practical side. What to do today? What to do today?
Learn how to grow food. Go to your closest supermarket and then see what kind of bulk dry foods they have, because these seeds that you see right behind me here, I have cowpeas right here, bought in the supermarket, cost me $1 for all these. Actually, I got way more than this for $1 because it came in a bag, and I just try to store them in the bottles. We got chickpeas here, and chickpeas you can buy pretty much anywhere. So I like to store everything in bottles just because I can see if there's any mold or fungus, an easy way to keep them dry. And there's everybody's got a million bottles. They throw these things away. They're free. The green beans or mung beans, these are great for a couple things because you can sprout them in 2 or 3 days, enough to eat them. But then they make those over there, that first little tray of sprouts are these. And then we have our red beans here, which is the same thing. So you can already find an enormous amount of things that you could sprout in. Like those greens that you're seeing behind me over there, those are those seeds right here that are being grown out. So the cowpeas are on the end, and then these green beans are right in the front. Learn how to grow something. Learn how to sprout it. Know what the bulk foods are that you could save for either food or for seed. Because you see, I got both here in one bottle. I got food and I got seed. And you should also maybe talk to people to know where the warehouses are. Where's the supermarkets getting all their stuff from? Like in your city, in the rail lines, where does that stuff come into? Or on the ports if you're in a port city?
Yeah, absolutely.
Grow food. How many? Go to your local nursery today. Talk to somebody there. If you're just driving along and you see somebody selling flowers, or you go to a nursery where they have, stop in and start a conversation. Find out what's the easiest thing to grow in your area and go grow it. and learn from there. Learn what other people are growing, and then there's all these kind of growing groups. Maybe find a growing group online today. That's your task. Find a grow group, and then go to the store and try to find some seeds that you can sprout. Something real simple like this to get your foot in the door. Because every time people come over and they see those sprouts, they're like, whoa, you grew those? Yeah. And there's like a million questions asked just about those simplest of things right here, these sprouts. People want to talk about it, and you say, hey, take the bottle home with you, sprout it, and then show me your pictures when you're done, okay? But next time you come by, bring the bottle back. And it's a great camaraderie thing, and it's a good way to bond with people. And
so do you
send somebody home with a huge bag of sprouts who'd be like, whoa, I got this thing, I got me big, like 10, 12, 15 bucks in the store. I got it from this. Yeah.
So what kind of compost do you use? Do you use ordinary, like from the store compost, or what are you using to grow it within? Or?
We got these bags of dirt from one of the local suppliers. It cost me like, how much is it? It cost me like $3.50 for a big 20-pound bag of dirt. And I get it from a local farmer who's over at the flower market over here, and they mix it with like just regular leaves and things from the forest that they chop up into smaller bits, and then they have some dung in there, cow dung, and then they mix it with dirt, and it's a pretty nice. It's not black. They do mix some clay in there because there's a lot of clay soil around, but they mix some volcanic ash and a few other things, some pumice and a few other things in there. It's a good mix.
Oh, good.
Light and airy, but it still has some girth to it. Super cheap. I mean, $3 for 20 pounds, you can't go wrong. And he delivers to the house too. So if you get 2 bags, if you get 40 or 50 pounds, he'll bring it to the house. That's what, like $6, $7, and he'll deliver. So I always get like 10, 20 bucks worth of the dirt because we have a whole bunch of pots out the back there.
Dude, that sounds like a win all around, man. So yeah, that's the homework for everyone today, including myself. I'm gonna go catch up on that and get to it today. My day is day off. It's free day today. I've got a meeting at 3:30, but apart from that, that's my day sorted, man. I'm gonna go learn how to plant and grow some food.
See, if everybody woke up with that same realization, we would go into this whole thing with a lot less fear factor, because from that point, then it's going to be about comparing how to grow, when to grow, what grows when, and all these things that your niche and specialty is into. Because I can grow these cowpeas, and I've grown them out into actual seed myself. So we have these bigger pots, and we let them come up, and then I harvest the seed, and I know about how much I get off of each plant. So for me, that could be my specialty skill set. I can take these cowpeas and turn them back in. We can eat half those for fresh greens. We can let the other ones, we can go replant them, put the strings out, get them to grow up, and then we can regrow. And if we can't buy any more from the store, no problem, because we can just replant what we grew again. Like, it's a skill set you got to learn. It took me years and years to learn all this. You're not going to do it in a day, so don't be like, how does this guy know all this stuff? Well, we used to go to my grandma's farm. This is in America, though. And they had like 7 acres where the house was, but a full almost 1 acre was a farm, like where we grew the food. They had corn, green beans. What else they have? They had spinach. I remember the spinach. I used to love the spinach.
Love spinach.
All kind of stuff. Grew all kind of veggies out there. And we would go with the grandparents' house, and we would always spend part of the summer there. And that was it. We always worked in the garden. Always worked in the garden. I learned how to can things. I learned how to, harvest it and then kind of prepare it and get it ready for the canning and how to do the jars and all this stuff. Like, this is what I learned as a kid. I don't think many people do that anymore.
No, I guess it's the corporations do all that for us, don't they? We just go to the supermarket and buy it. That's what it is these days.
That's the Achilles heel, is you too relying on the supermarket. Try this. Just go one day without going to a supermarket. Or no, try to go a week without a supermarket and see if you can go and find anything elsewhere without going to a supermarket to get your needs.
Okay, that sounds like...
You can't go to a 7-Eleven and you can't go to a supermarket. You have to go somewhere else to find your food.
Okay. So if everyone listening, that actually...
No fast food. That's cheating, man. You can't go to a fast food drive-thru. It's got to... You know what I really mean? Like, take that whole supply chain out of the equation. That's really easy at your fingertips, and see how you can maneuver across there. Well, if you know where there's a seed supplier, you got to get this. Go with these and grow them out in 2 days, and you got green beans to grow. All right, now what? Where do you get your meat from?
Go to the local butchers, or actually, Nottingham, where I live, actually, we're literally on the edge.
That counts. You can go to a local butcher, but you got to find where those people are, because they'll be the last ones that have meat. The supermarket will run out ages before, because if you got a relationship with your butcher, they're going to give you meat when the supermarket's well run out for sure.
No, you're right. So, like, where I live in Nottingham, I live at kind of like If I go 2 minutes that way, I'm in the countryside. Go like a minute that way, I'm in the city. So I literally live on that kind of precipice on the outside. So I kind of have a touch with like the local farms nearby if I just can ring them up, whatever. But yeah, it's pretty incredible to how balanced the world is, because we're so reliant on the supermarkets. There's a whole supply chain of money and infrastructure there that allows so many people to live in a very small space. And as that food runs out, these people are going to start panicking in the cities.
Hey, hold on a second. I got something right here. I'll bring back and show you. Hold on a second.
Okay, sure. Awesome. What you got there, dude? What you got?
These are the new grow bags that I just bought and have delivered to the house. So we're going to be planting these out on the back too. They're super easy to use.
Grow bags, yes.
They're felt cloth grow bags.
Okay.
And you got the handles on the side, so you can put. We're trying to grow potatoes in these to see what we can do with potatoes, and they're just about this deep, and we'll fill it about this full, and you can move them around with handles, and you can put a bunch of larger plants out of here. So this is our experiment to do all these bags with potatoes and different types of potatoes. So this is the thing for the weekend when we have a little more time to be able to grow out these bags here.
So how many potatoes do you
I'm living what I'm telling you.
How
do you really think I'm not going to just sit here and talk and say, hey, going into a grand solar minimum, you need to grow your own food. Yeah, how many people do you see with this much stuff sitting there in the living room ready to plant? I'm serious. You need to grow your own food. You're going to die if you don't know how to do that.
Fair point. So with those potatoes, how many seeds would you like put in that bag? Would you want a whole bunch of seeds or just a couple? Or how much would you use?
Probably 4 seed potatoes in each one of those bags, because I actually want to use these for potato specific. So, a seed potato is, if you have a potato and you leave it in a dark place and one of those green shoots starts to come out of it, you can usually cut the potato in half, or if there's a couple shoots, just cut it in a quarter, and then I would put 4 of those in each one of those bags.
Oh, okay.
Some people put a few more, but I think 4 is about enough. And then, you can get a fair 12 pounds of potatoes or more out of each one of those bags, maybe a little more, depending.
All right, because plants are a weird creature, aren't they? They grow and they'll plant and they'll sprout and they'll give leaves and stuff. Potatoes are probably one of the weirdest, actually. Like you said, from a very root that comes off the potato itself, you can grow a whole potato.
Yeah, we're going to do some ginger in here, too. We're trying to do some turmeric and some ginger. Those are a little bit more slow growing, so it's more like plant them and just put them over to the side and wait for that. But I want to also experiment with Moringa oleifera. That's a super fast new, they call it the miracle tree. And it's very highly nutritious and a lot of vitamins and minerals. And keep in mind, one of the most important things, they found during all these grand solar minimums, after they dig up the remains of people and test their bones and do different tests on them to see, they were incredibly mineral deficit. They could tell they were emaciated in mineral and nutrient deficit in their body just by their bone structure. So this is how diseases sweep through as well. Because right now you're sitting there, you're well-nourished, I'm well-nourished. A lot of stuff that we would never get sick from will just sweep through our bodies if we're not eating correctly and if we not have enough vitamins, minerals, nutrients in our body. You're going to get sick. Your immune system's going to go down. So that's another thing to contend with is what are the most highly dense packed foods? Moringa oleifera, algae. These are the kind of spirulina algae. Moringa, these are kind of in the same family of... you just need a little bit to keep your immune system up.
Dude, that's...
Not medical advice. Ooh, not medical advice. Don't want to get taken off the net for talking about keeping your body healthy.
It's true. That is happening to people. So, yeah, that's... I know. It's crazy. Well, dude, I've just looked at our clock, 2 hours and 32 minutes, 42 seconds. That's pretty crazy. I thought this might last for about maybe 2 hours. We've obviously clocked over that. So, but no, it's been awesome to talk to you, man. Hopefully, I can tap up you again for sometime soon as well. I'd hope. Tell me about how those potatoes are going.
Yes, and you can find more information on Adapt 2030 on my YouTube channel, where I do garden updates with the vertical grow tubes. I do that Adapt 2030, and I'll do some gardening updates there. You can also listen to my podcast, Mini Ice Age Conversations, and I'll have the new podcast app coming out. I'm just finishing up the iOS part of it. I got the Google Play and that whole Google Play store done with that side. And I'm just getting the Apple side of iOS done, and then once that, up we go. We got the podcast app out. And oilseedcrops.org/global cooling. There's a whole resource page there, about 120 links. You can jump out and check out everything we talked about, as well as an enormous amount of grow guides and different types of nutritious plants. And there's a whole avenue of getting you to at least take a look at the plants that you can grow, and then a whole nother avenue down over here of all the information behind it to prove the science, to back up in science what I'm saying. And again, tonight's conversation was great. It was fine and dandy, awesome. But I don't want you to believe me. See, that's the thing. I don't want you to believe me. Your job is not to believe me. Your job is to go do the research yourself and try to disprove me. And I wish you would do that. I want you to try to disprove me. All right? So do your own research about plants. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But try to disprove the grand solar minimum, and please try to disprove it. And because then you have to do your own research into it, and you'll find what other people are writing about it and whatnot.
You're part of the My Patriot Supply network.
So, I am, yeah.
Oh, good. That's awesome, man. That's awesome, dude. I think there's a few websites that I know of.
Why, do you have an affiliate? Do you have an affiliate link with them as well?
I don't. No. I'm just aware of them. That's really awesome, dude. I kind of wish there was something similar to that over here.
Yeah, because My Patriot Supply, they don't deliver outside the United States, and nor does the seed company that I promote for called TrueLeafMarket.com. And the only reason I'll tell you that out there, TrueLeafMarket.com, and I'm not even going to give you my affiliate link. Just go there because they have free growing guides on how to grow sprouts and every kind of vegetable that they offer seeds for. They have a growing guide for free in there as well. So if you want to get a huge amount of head start on the information, go to TrueLeafMarket.com and take a look at their selection of seeds to at least see even what you can grow. They have sprouts, microgreens, herbs, spices, all this kind of thing, and veggies and this, whatever. Yeah, but then take a look at the growing guide so you can at least get into, I can do that.
Okay.
I only need 2 cups of water. I only need this much dirt, a pound of dirt. I only need this little bag of seeds, and I can grow something. Super easy. But you got to start somewhere to learn how to plant.
Yeah, I've got their site on the screen now so everyone can see. That's really awesome, dude. TrueLeafMarket.com. Okay. I think I shall tap them up for some information as well. So awesome. I got to see.
Yeah, one last thing. The only reason I'm with My Patriot Supply is I know Jim White from Northwest Liberty News, and he used to work with them. And, as I was looking at it, an enormous amount of people approaching me saying, hey, you got 85,000 people on your channel almost. Can you, put our company out there? And I'm very, very, very selective with who I talk about on my channel, because unless I believe in it, I won't talk about it.
That's the
so the recommendations that I have, I only believe in myself. I've only tested their product, bought it, used it, or I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to give anybody junk info. There's so much junk out there, but I want to give you the best of the best, so I present only what I believe in on there.
That's a very wise thing to do. Test it, run it yourself, and then I'll talk about it.
Yeah, you got to.
David, man, I've actually really enjoyed this conversation today. I've learned a lot from it that I'm going to go take away from this. So, look, dude, we've definitely got to tap up in the future very soon. And it'd be good to catch up with you whenever you're free, my good man. So what are you got coming up this weekend then? What are you doing?
Well, we're just gonna do a little bit of planting here. I'm gonna do a couple more videos. We want to run out to the beach because again, the fishermen come in around 4 p.m. and we wanted to see what they had, what they're bringing in. We wanted to cook and have some wine and make a nice dinner on Saturday night at home here.
Wow, dude.
So again, we go where the fishermen come into the port. They bring their stuff in ice in the baskets, and then we go talk to them. That's the kind of where we're going. We're not going to a supermarket to get our stuff.
You get it straight from the.
So again, where are you in the food supply chain? You really need to know where the food comes from around where you live. The supermarket's way too easy. I'm telling you, that is an Achilles heel moving forward. I think just have fun in the week. Have fun and just cruise around and really find where your local vendors are and support them too. Because a lot of this big money goes into the big supermarkets, leaves your area. Why don't you support the local people in your area so you can support your local community? Because that's where the real resilience I always found is the local communities had the most support. So these are the kind of areas that had pretty good, they survived and had pretty good existences. The bigger and better organized your community is, or more organized is, the easier it's going to be for you to get through this. Because you can't do it alone. Never going to. You need people around. You need a community. You need like-minded people to help.
Man, dude, that sounds a perfect place to round off quite nicely. All right, dude. So we'll call it a day here. So you just before you go, so your website is oilseedcrops.org, and you say people can find you out on YouTube at Adapt 2030. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so I shall point people in that direction. I'll make sure there's graphics and make it all nice and pretty for you.
And excellent. We need to talk more about ancient history and these cycles next time, because I wanted to get down to the Akkadians and talk about some stuff that nobody ever hears about, you know?
Okay, that's a promise for next time, yeah?
All right, thanks so much.
All right, dude. I shall take care, man.
Kristian, talk to you later.
All right, take care, man. Have a good day.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. So what's this window all about? This is my melting pot home to different kinds of content, the things that interest me, products that I'm presently doing or have been involved with. I have a thirst for knowledge, inspiration, adventure, and discovery. There's presentations, talks, completed film projects, documentary material, edits of some of the live performances that have been the videographer and the editor behind, accessible how-tos and blog content. I have a passion for exploring our curious world. That has led to the creation of the video and audio podcast that I produce and host called Our Curious World, about having genuine conversations with guests across various topics, engaging with people, inspired by the Joe Rogan Experience and Coast to Coast AM. I love talking about the things that have us asking questions and learning along the way. We really do live in interesting and fascinating times. I have a history involved with the research of the unexplained, all things Fortean. You'll also find the 24-episode radio series Rabbit Hole That Is Reality that I produced through 2013 and 14, which are available on this channel to listen to as well. I'm an avid gamer, artist, creative, who's not afraid to experiment, be silly, and let my hair down, as it were. So join me on this journey figuring stuff out and producing material along the way. Hit up a like, a subscribe, and join the conversation.